Thank you. I'm going to for the first picture to go live. There we go. Great. Well, welcome to a regular City Council meeting for Bellevue, July 12, 2021. We have a heavy agenda tonight. I'm going to remind the council to keep their comments to 3 minutes maximum at a time, but we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to speak tonight. Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Mayor Robinson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
Here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn?
Here.
Deputy Mayor, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Certainly, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Clerk, do you have anybody signed up for oral communication tonight?
There are, Mayor, but I believe we have the approval of the agenda first.
You're right about that. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, now on to oral communications.
Thank you, Mayor. There are actually 8 speakers pre-registered this evening. However, 2 speakers are signed up for a topic where we already will have 3 if everyone attends. So with that, I will call the first speaker, who is Judy Gowdy. And Ms. Gowdy, can you hear me?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Wonderful. So I am a resident of the city of Bellevue and am very much in favor of supporting whatever we can do to help with homelessness and making housing affordable. I've been following the Eastgate campus developments and in support of the organizations and plans that are being put in place. The whole project has been carefully vetted, and it's unique in that it provides a full spectrum of housing needs, from homelessness shelter to supportive housing to workforce housing. And I would encourage you in your consideration tonight of additional funding for that project to be supportive of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gowdy. The second speaker on our list tonight is Cynthia Cole. And Ms. Cole, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, my name is Cynthia Cole. I'm a resident of Lake Hills, and I want to talk about the new land use codes, or our land use codes that will have to be updated because of ordinances 6585 and 6586. These are being impacted by HB 1220, which was passed in the last legislative session. This new law requires supportive and homeless housing to be allowed everywhere there is a residential zone or a zone that allows hotels and motels. While HB 1220 was being debated in Olympia, I'm hoping our legislative lobbyists were allowed to advocate for the city of Bellevue. It seems as if the legislature did not listen to cities like Bellevue who have employed thoughtful land use planning. The legislature could have created a way for Bellevue to share our best practices in land use planning. From what I've observed, our Bellevue Planning Commission and past actions by our Bellevue City Council have set the standard for being proactive in balancing the needs of residents and the needs of the homeless in our community. Well, now we have a chance to set the standard for the region and how to accommodate this unnecessary state law. I would like the City Council to not go beyond the bare limits of the requirements of HB 1220. I would like the Bellevue City Council to require a conditional use permit for every change in land use code required by HB 1220. Requiring conditional use permits would also involve public outreach and input. One of the council's priorities is to make sure every community in Bellevue has the chance to weigh in on land use code changes. Equity would be served by involving Lake Hills, Newport Hills, Maidenbower, Eastgate, Wilburton, downtown, all of Bellevue. And I'm not a real policy wonk, but I think it's process 3, part 20.30b.120 in our city land use codes that require conditional use permits and public hearings on requirements levied by the state to ensure that their changes to our ordinances are compatible with other nearby land use. Bellevue has been handed a tough situation. Let's work together to make sure this does not undo all of the progress we have made through the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. The next speaker on the list is Kurt Letterman. Mr. Letterman, can you hear me?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members for giving me the opportunity to speak. I live in the Cougar Mountain area of Bellevue and am a passionate supporter of a wide range of housing options to serve all of Bellevue's residents. As a formerly homeless person myself, I care deeply about issues of affordable housing and homelessness, and I have been a longtime supporter of congregations for the homeless. I would encourage you to move forward on support and approve the supplemental requests that Congregations for the Homeless and the other partners at the Eastgate housing site have put forward, and would hope that you would see your way to approving those and to increasing the housing inventory and affordable options for all of Bellevue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Letterman. The next speaker on the list is Marilyn McGuire. And sorry, I lost you on my list there for a second. Ms. McGuire, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. I'm Marilyn McGuire and a resident of Northeast Bellevue. My address is on file. I'd like to address the same agenda items 12B and C regarding the housing ordinances. We have discussed housing for months through the Great Neighborhoods program. We have addressed implications of affordable housing not being truly affordable in Bellevue and the impacts of increased density on neighborhood life and character, among other topics. Residents in Northeast and Northwest Bellevue have devoted many hours and a great deal of effort to the development of their Great Neighborhoods plans. We have been pleased with the dialogue and scheduling of sessions, both with Great Neighborhood staff and with the Planning Commission. We are surprised to find these ordinances on tonight's agenda, as the underlying laws were passed in May when Great Neighborhoods was in full swing, yet no one from the city discussed this with us. These laws impact our neighborhoods and are not specifically addressed in the plans. Things are moving at a very swift pace, and residents can't be expected to be on top of all the emerging laws and decisions. We depend upon our city leaders to keep us informed. I hope that there are plans to continue the dialogue with those who will live with these decisions on a daily basis. The city has a clear duty to all residents, and the decision should not favor one group over another, but allow us all to work together to address needs of our neighborhoods. Let me be crystal clear. We are committed to addressing the issue of housing for low-income and homeless people. The decision on housing density is the first step. It's not a complete plan. There are many decisions that need to be made in order to successfully implement this plan. What are the needed supports for increased density in the neighborhoods? How do we plan proactively for impacts of infrastructure, such as water, sewer, transportation, and traffic, for example? What are the safety rails for both homeless and residents to address inevitable conflicts and potential crime that happens when people are living very close together in high density neighborhoods? Seattle clearly illustrates the implications of not having a plan, an example we do not want to repeat. Housing by itself does not guarantee success for vulnerable populations, nor the neighborhoods where they are located. Please permit me to give you an educational example of what I'm addressing. If a student with ADD has been given a medication to help mitigate his issues, the medication is intended to help the student be more psychologically available to learn. It does not give him skills he does not have. Providing housing for low-income and homeless does not help someone develop skills to be economically self-supportive or solve problems of addiction or mental health. Those are the necessary focused steps in implementation. They must be considered and specific actions taken in your process so the problems faced by these new members of our community are addressed, not simply warehoused. You have time now to look at the impacts of this legislation and to plan proactively to truly make a difference in the lives of people who need help. I sincerely hope that you will do this as your next steps and that our neighbors are actively engaged in the process because we need to be. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire. The next speaker on the list is Al Rosenthal. And Mr. Rosenthal, I do not see you by name connected to the meeting. If you're connected with a phone, can you use *9 to raise your hand? Okay, I don't see Mr. Rosenthal at this point. I will move on to the next speaker, who is Patience Malaba. And Ms. Malaba, I'm assuming that this is you. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect, that is you. Thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. For the record, I am Patience Malaba, Director of Government Relations and Policy at the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle-King County. I am calling today on behalf of the Eastside Housing Roundtable to express our strong support for the proposed supplemental funding recommendation for the Eastgate Housing Campus projects. We do urge your swift action and sense of urgency with no delays in moving the additional funding allocations forward by giving direction to staff today and preparing for a full vote at the July 19th meeting. We already sent a comment letter with details on our support, but I want to reiterate that moving swiftly on this will ensure that all parties involved will preserve their other financing commitments and allow the Congregation for the Homeless to complete their public engagement process and permit construction to begin on other projects. We do believe that the Eastside Housing Campus will help the entire community be safe by bringing people inside, and we do commend your thoughtful leadership in exploring the additional funding options that you have before you today for the project, and urge you once again to adopt the recommendations with no delay to effectively help the project complete their financing. I'll close by thanking you for your diligent work towards addressing the affordable housing need in Bellevue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malaba. And I will see, is Al Rosenthal, Mr. Rosenthal, are you connected to the meeting? If so, please use *9 or the raise hand function. Okay, Mayor, that is the end of our pre-registered list. So at this point, I would like to ask if there is anyone else connected to this meeting who would like to make comment to the City Council. We have reached the maximum number of speakers on item 10A, which is the Affordable Housing Capital Funding Request. So we cannot take any more speakers in support of that item. If you have another item you would like to speak up, please use the raise hand function or *9 if connected with a phone. Yeah, Mayor, I do not see any additional hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we have a few study session items to discuss here. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first one?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As you mentioned, we have two topics under the study session agenda this evening. And the first study session matter in front of you are 3 affordable housing capital funding requests for projects located in Bellevue related to the Eastside Men's Shelter, the Eastgate Permanent Supportive Housing Project, and the preservation of the Illahi apartments located in the Bell Red area. And just by way of background, the city has dedicated resources from a number of sources targeted at affordable housing. And the 3 current requests that are being brought forward for council consideration are here because they meet an immediate need and are consistent with city policy, direction, and priorities. Following the staff presentation and council discussion, staff is seeking council direction to prepare legislation approving the funding requests for the council action at a future meeting. Joining us this evening is Emil King, Assistant Director, as well as Lindsay Masters, Arts Executive Manager from the Community Development Department. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Emil.
So before Emil starts, I'm just going to say that for meeting management, I will be present for the men's shelter discussion and the Eastgate permanent supportive housing discussion, but then I will recuse myself for the Illahi discussion, and we will let the deputy mayor take over, and I will return when that vote is done. So go ahead, Emil.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and members of council. Tonight, staff are here to talk about recommendations to use existing city affordable housing funds towards 3 projects located in Bellevue. We believe these investments, when partnered with other funds, will address time-sensitive needs and continue to show our continuing commitment to housing for all. Could you please advance to the next slide? Tonight, we're asking for direction from council for 3 requests: the Eastside Men's Shelter, Eastgate Supportive Housing, and Illahi Apartments. Based on council direction, staff would return with appropriate legislation to award funding to these projects at an upcoming council meeting. Next slide, please. The agenda for this study session is as follows. We'll review the funding requests at a high level. We'll provide an overview of the available city resources we have right now for affordable housing. We'll then go into the city policy direction to use these funds, followed by a review of each of the 3 funding requests. We'll start with the men's shelter, then the supportive housing project, and lastly, the Illahi Apartments. Following each of the requests, we'll pause for any questions and then ask for council direction on each one individually. Next slide, please. The total of the funding requests for Bellevue contributions is $8 million. You'll see in our presentation that these requests are part of larger asks and build upon previous commitments already in place. The men's shelter request is $3.6 million. The Eastgate supportive housing request is $400,000, and the Illahi Apartments preservation is $4 million. Next slide, please. As mentioned previously, the total of these 3 requests is $8 million. The city currently has $12.4 million in funding available for affordable housing and related uses. This excludes the new House Bill 1590 revenue source that went into effect earlier this year. The existing resources are comprised of $7 million of accumulated funds in the city's housing contingency. This fund was put in place a few years ago and has grown with funding to $7 million. We also have out-year contributions through 2022 to 2027 and an additional $2 million per year that is not part of the $7 million. The Bellred land use incentive system has provisions for developers to pay a fee in lieu of building affordable housing as part of their project. This has accumulated $3.4 million to date and is intended to go towards Bellred investment. House Bill 1406, enacted in 2019, provides a local revenue source for affordable housing below 60% AMI, and it does this by retaining a larger portion of state sales and use taxes. Bellevue has accumulated about $800,000 to date and estimates about another $625,000 per year moving forward. And lastly, the city does have about $1.2 million in other balances for housing, such as arch loan repayments that have been accumulated over the years, but yet unspent. Next slide, please. I want to go into a bit on the city policy direction and priorities. The council recently confirmed their 2021 to 2023 council priorities. In addition, we have the affordable housing strategy adopted in 2017 and the city's comprehensive plan. These 3 documents point towards a series of priorities and directions for use of monies. The first is working toward an Eastside solution for a permanent men's shelter. The second is executing affordable housing by creating deeply affordable housing for the less than 30% AMI range. In addition, we have policy direction on developing affordable housing on public lands, pursuing funding partnerships, and pursuing preservation opportunities. Next slide, please. We're going to begin going into detail on the funding requests. We're going to start with the Eastside Men's Shelter and supportive housing. I'll first be turning things over to Lindsay, who is going to go into a bit of detail on the overall Eastgate master development, and then go into a bit of detail on each one of those individual funding requests. So I'm going to hand it over to you now, Lindsay, please.
Great, thank you, Emil, and thank you, council members, for having me. I'm pleased to be back here to talk to you again about this really important project, the Eastgate Master Development. It's a project and a set of projects that you have supported in the past, as each of these individual components have come to you as recommendations through the ARCH funding round. And to reorient you as to how the development came about, this started with efforts by congregations for the homeless for many years to find a location for a permanent shelter for homeless men on the side. After a number of years of searching for sites, they were able to secure the 10-acre parcel that is the subject of this development, owned by King County Solid Waste. The county recently voted out of the committee as a whole to approve the sale of the site to the project partners. It's located on Eastgate Way, just east of I-405. And to acknowledge the opportunity afforded by the site, as well as some of the challenges of such a large site, CFH has also brought in additional project partners who have become a part of this campus and are partnered with them to create a continuum of housing and services. As far as the specifics of the shelter itself, I will go into this component first and then follow up with other project components that are a part of the master development. So again, as you know, you're familiar with this project. CFH has been working for many years to create a year-round emergency shelter for homeless men. These efforts go back many years, starting probably as early as 2014, if not earlier. And the organization has remained really steadfast in its commitment to navigating all the challenges along the way. And it's also with the support of the city that the project has gotten to where it is today, including from the city being able to accommodate a temporary location for the shelter and some operational funding to keep it going while this permanent location is built out. Over these years, I just want to remind us all that the need for this shelter has not gone away, and in fact, it has grown. In the last year, in 2020, CFA 800 unduplicated homeless men at its temporary shelter location, and another 700 separate individuals with a variety of other services. So the urgency to move this project forward is still with us today. As it continues to provide those critical services, the project team has also created a lot of momentum towards what's now a major capital project and undertaking for them. They've raised $13.4 million in total financing commitments to date, and they are well underway through the conditional use permit process. We can go to the next slide. A really important part of this project is the Polaris Workforce Housing. This project is really going to anchor the master development and provide a large scale number of workforce housing units that are significantly providing a number of family-sized 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. All of the units in the project will be affordable at 50% and 60% of median income. This project has also been very successful in raising a significant amount of other public and private funding, in addition to the very early seed funding that ARCH provided a couple of years back, of which Bellevue's portion came out to about $263,000. In the process of going out and raising other funds, the developer was able to receive a large award from King County, totaling $8 million, which was the key piece to accessing all the other bonds and tax credits needed for the project. That has enabled us to return the funding that was originally contributed from ARCH to be able to make that available to the other parts of the campus that still have a fund. Next slide. Finally, the Eastgate Supportive Housing Project makes up the final building site, and Plymouth was the last partner brought into the project early last year, and they were selected to create another housing opportunity on the continuum. And it's one focused on directly providing housing for homeless individuals coming directly from shelter referrals from the Eastside. And so they've formed a really strong and important partnership with CFH as a campus partner, as well as with the Sophia Way, who we also expect to be referring homeless women from their Eastside shelter. Plymouth, as you know, we discussed their funding recommendation for them earlier this year, and they were happy to come and present and introduce themselves as an organization that's new to the East Side. But they are very excited to be here and partnering with us. And they have really shown their commitment as a project partner by participating every step of the way in the Good Neighbor process that CFH is undertaking related to its permit. They have decades of experience operating supportive housing developments, integrating them into neighborhoods. They have a history of strong relationships with their neighboring businesses and other tenants, and built up strong relationships with jurisdiction and with law enforcement. In addition to a significant amount of capital funds that they've raised for the project in the last year, they have also secured all of the necessary operating and services subsidies to provide the baseline staffing, 24/7 staffing that will be operating on the site year-round. Let's move on to the next slide. So I'll go now into the specific funding requests that have come from both the men's shelter and from the supportive housing project. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the drivers for how these requests came about. In the last couple of months, the project team is really working towards finalizing their costs and obtain some new pricing that resulted in significant cost increases to the project. This is not unique to the shelter or the supportive housing. Unfortunately, it's been an industry-wide phenomenon. We know that out of a total of 16 affordable housing projects that have been funded in King County, 15 of those have come back with cost increases and funding gaps that as an industry we're trying to deal with. There's trends similar to that across Washington State. The increases are all driven by construction-related factors. Most notably, there's been significant spikes in cost of materials, as well as significant increases in labor rates. A couple of more minor drivers unique to this shelter is that CFH has been responsive to many of the requests from the Good Neighbor Advisory Committee process, and has adapted some of its design to be able to enhance the project to meet those requests. Also related to that, the time that it has taken to undertake the conditional use permit process has moved their construction timeline further out from their campus partners, whereas their original cost estimates had assumed some synergies from being able to do much of the site development simultaneously. And then finally, they have also had to adapt their design to the new energy code that went into effect in January. And the positive aspect of that is that while they carry an upfront cost that's greater than they were planning, those will help to lower the operational costs over time with energy savings and also lower the building's impact on the environment. So the request that's under consideration tonight is for an additional $3.6 million from the city. And ARCH has been working closely with King County and the State Housing Trust Fund to ensure that they will be able to come up with the remaining funds needed to fill that funding gap. These funds would be structured Consistent with our existing awards to the project, the funding would be an up to funding amount based on the actual final costs and needs. And we would be tracking the continued process to conduct value engineering and bring the actual final cost down as much as possible. So I think, as just in summary, this funding award is critical. There's some timing urgency to it because it is part of a simultaneous closing on the acquisition that is going to occur for all of the project partners. But it is important and it is critical to ensuring that the project is successful, as well as the campus partners. So I think with that, we're going to move to the request for direction and would be happy to answer any questions about those details.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. So this is going to now be a discussion about the Eastside Men's Shelter, and we will take a vote at the end of that to determine whether or not we provide additional funding. So I'm going to go ahead and call in this order: Councilmember Barksdale, Robertson, Zahn, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, Councilmember Stokes, Lee, and then myself. So Councilmember Barksdale, would you like to start us off?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I support the providing the supplemental funding to the for the Eastside Men's Shelter. CFH has done an outstanding job with helping to manage or address homelessness in our community, and I think we're going to need to continue to provide the support for them to continue to provide the support in the community. So I support it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
You. This has been a long time coming. I have a quick question for Lindsay. Is CFH, are there any strings from the county or anyone else on their funding that is requiring them to be in the Coordinated Entry for All program?
No, it is not. Coordinated Entry for All is not applicable to the shelter.
Good, because I know that they're really important to serving the men who find themselves homeless in Bellevue. So I'm absolutely in favor of this. I wish we'd gotten this done sooner. I know that it took a long time for them to acquire the property, and that caused some delay. And there's a lot of driving factors with, particularly under COVID, construction materials have skyrocketed. And so I would be surprised if they didn't have a significant increase. So yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing that we've put money aside for, and I think that we should go ahead and do it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I too support the project and moving with urgency, because I do think there's some time sensitivity. Construction cost is only escalating quicker and quicker the more we wait. I did have a question because you mentioned that because of the Good Neighbor process that the project is now, from a schedule standpoint, out of sync with the rest of the development. So we are actually spending money to support this project. So if there are things that we can do ourselves within the city to be able to allow a clearing and grading permit so that there's cost savings, then I think that needs to be something that we're seriously considering. So as we vote on this funding increase, I think that we should be also, as much as possible, being as fiscally responsible as possible. So if being able to issue a clearing and grading permit allows us to have cost savings so that our money goes farther and can be used for other things, I think that's something we should consider. So I wondered if Emil or Lindsay could comment on that, or Mike Brennan.
And I'd be curious if the council has a role in that as well.
So thank you for the question, Councilmember Zahn. This is Mike Brennan, Director of Development Services. It is a decision that is an administrative decision in response to the mayor's question about where it falls. So that decision does lie with director. So the codes are providing some fairly specific guidance on this particular question. So the clearing and grading code has language that essentially says that if there's an underlying land use decision or environmental SEPA decision required to allow a project to proceed, that process needs to run its course to approval, allowing the public engagement to occur before construction begins or before a clearing and grading permit can be released. I'm guessing the reason that was put into the city's code was to show that we are listening to the public and didn't want to presuppose an outcome by allowing construction to begin before that public process had completed its course. So we are working very closely with CFH, moving as quickly as we can through the conditional use permit process, working with the Good Neighbor Agreement Advisory Committee. It has been very productive discussions, as you've heard, and we're working to try to get this permit out as quickly as we can. I do understand there's some sequencing challenges that they're having. We will continue to work with them to try to find anything that we can do to save them costs.
Yeah, thank you, because saving them costs is saving us costs, right? Because they are us. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, very much in support of moving this forward as well. Obviously, as my colleagues have said, this is urgent, due to the acquisition and the other partners involved. Obviously, this has been a priority, not just for this council, but prior councils as well. So we need to keep moving this forward, need to continue to support those agencies like CFH, for this Eastgate campus, and we need to support them to ensure this is going to be successful. And I just want to take a moment to thank all those also that are on this Good Neighbor Advisory group that have dedicated a lot of time and effort to put forward to ensure that this is a project that's embraced by the community and embraced by small businesses or even large businesses in that area. And they play a very large role in that. And even if that did add some additional costs, I think that's money well spent. So this is just great news all around. Wish we could have done this sooner, but we're here now, so let's support it, keep moving this forward. And also want to thank the staff, Mike, Emil, Lindsay, thank you so much for looking for those opportunities to move this even closer or move this even quicker if possible, or anything that we can do to cut costs. I know that's something that we've been actively looking at for quite some time. So, this city and this council is dedicated to making this a success. So thank you for all your efforts. And yeah, I'm ready to move this forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments that have been made so far. It is, it's time. I just thinking back on this is like going on 7 years of trying to get this done. And it's been a long process, so it's always exciting to get to this stage. We started out, and I found this looking through some material. We had 14 sites we were looking at, and this was one of them. And there were, questions about and everything, but I'm hoping that the time wasn't misspent in a sense that maybe this, in conjunction with the other thing we're going to be talking about tonight, actually gives us probably the best opportunity to make this work really well. And I appreciate all the comments made about the neighborhood and everything. And I'd like to see the Good Neighbor group's work plan and everything. I don't think I may have missed it, but it'd be nice for us to have that and see how that is turning out. And just really excited about it. I'm looking forward to the groundbreaking. And I love the fit we have in the affordable housing part of it and how that's all going. So, and the other factor is the public understand this is a permanent location for a temporary shelter that is a very, very needed part in Bellevue to meet our obligations and the things we've been talking about since I came on council in terms of we need to do this and we're doing it. And that's the exciting thing. So I'm all for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, good things don't happen quickly. It takes time. Weeds grow fast, but this is a very, very important project. I'm very thankful that we are getting to where we are, thanks to the staff, thanks to the public, especially this Good Neighbor agreement. I think the way the staff now is calling it is enhancement. Indeed it is, because this is a very challenging issue for us to handle. So I think with patience, with the time we spend on it, I'm really, really excited and happy to see it's coming to fruition. We were briefed on this project a few months ago, and we look at it, and the partners. We know Congregation Homeless, they're always a good partner. And Plymouth is proven to be wonderful people who have lots of experience to do this. And this workforce housing, that's another piece of very important element to make sure this whole thing works. So I'm really happy to see that. And I think obviously, taking time is going to cost more money. A lot of things we never anticipated, but good things don't happen on the cheap. We are committed to do it. And I'm really happy that we take the time and we look at getting the good partners. And I want to give the neighbors, the people who are supported it and have patience and stay with us and see this happen. And the people who have concerns about it, I'm very happy too. They are working with us and seeing that it's going to work out and it's going to meet our goal and priority for this region. So I'm really happy. But my question is, we understand some of the costs we have to pay are unavoidable. Some of the costs I think Councilmember Robertson already brought out, or Councilmember Zahn did, taxes, sales tax and this and that. And I'm sure the city staff already worked very hard to make it as efficient as possible. But are there other things, such as you mentioned, taxes? Can we provide any tax incentive? We do that with our multi-family tax exempt. What opportunity would there be for us to reduce costs if the council can do something about it in terms of policy? So, Mike, what do you think? Mr. Brandon?
Yeah, why don't Lindsay, do you want to go over a bit on the thought from CFH when they were looking at the costs and if there were anything that synced up with some of Councilmember Lee's questions as far as trying to reduce costs, please?
You save us all money, and so why not? Thank you. And I want to compliment Arch too. I'm very, very happy Arch is involved because they have proven to be wonderful regional housing, not just advocate, they are actually doing it for all these years. And I'm really glad that, it's all working out. So thanks.
Thank you,
and we're supported. I'm all for it.
Yes, appreciate the comment. And I will speak on behalf of the whole project team. They are very committed to trying to not have to utilize the entire funding that's being requested to bring the cost of the project down. They are likely to be able to have a tax exempt status as a nonprofit shelter, so they would not be impacted by property taxes, but they would have to be paying sales tax on all of the construction costs, just as a matter of what's applicable to the project. We are looking at a couple other opportunities to bring the total cost down. For instance, looking at a new grant program that could help reduce the utility hookup fees. So we're going to continue working on that in the coming months.
Thank you. We're all in this together.
Thank you. Okay, well, I really appreciate all the comments. It's so gratifying to have a council unified in support of this men's shelter. I don't think there's anybody in the city who feels good about seeing somebody living out in the open, and it's certainly not healthy for the individual. And if we're going to address our homelessness problem, which we have a very real homelessness problem in Bellevue, it's imperative that we get this done. I know that you're on a really tight schedule with this, Lindsay, and I appreciate you and staff and everybody coming together to bring this forward to us so that we could vote on it tonight. I like what Council Members Zahn and Lee were talking about in trying to reduce any costs, and I think you were referencing the linkage fees that sometimes a project like this could be exempt from. So if there's any policy that you would recommend that we look at as a council, you might recommend that to us, that we could have that presentation on that as we move forward. But thank you. Of course, I support this. And so I'm looking for a motion to direct staff to prepare legislation for the Eastside Men's Shelter. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I move direct staff to prepare legislation approving the funding recommendation for the Eastside Men's Shelter for final action at a future meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that passes. Thank you. All right, next up, we are going to hear about the Eastgate permanent supportive housing done by Plymouth. So Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the speakers on this?
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emil King as well as Lindsay Masters to tee this up, Mayor. Emil?
Okay. Yeah, so if we could bring up slide 13. Thank you. And so now we're focusing on the Eastgate supportive housing, or the Plymouth Housing Project. And I'm going to hand things over to Lindsay to briefly go over some of the background on the cost increases. And then similar to what we just did for the shelter, we will be asking for direction on this one. So I'm going to hand things over to you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Emil. Yes, so some of these are going to sound very familiar. I've talked to you about the general project background and that it will be creating 95 units of permanent supportive housing that are going to be a really important part of the continuum to help individuals actually move out of that shelter into long-term stable housing. So we're fortunate that the project has gotten very close to the finish line. They've already raised $28.5 million. And we have also been able to get conditional commitments of additional gap funding from the state and King County, totaling $2.7 million. So that leaves a remaining gap of $400,000 that's requested from the city. And again, these are driven by construction-related factors, most significant material and labor costs, and then the associated impacts on how much sales tax they have to pay on those as well. They also have participated again in that good neighbor process, and so have also been making additional design adaptations in response to the requests from that process. So again, if granted, this funding would help complete the overall financing for the entire campus to enable them to close on the acquisition of the entire 10-acre site and advance all three of the projects together. It would also, as we discussed earlier this year, be the first permanent supportive housing project on the east side, and therefore be making a really significant effort in Bellevue's contribution towards our region's efforts to address homelessness and move people into stable housing. And with that, I think we will move to seek some direction.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give everybody again a chance to participate in this discussion. I'm going to go in this order: Councilmember Stokes, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, Councilmember Zahn, Lee, Barksdale, Robertson, and then myself. So Councilmember Stokes, can you start us off, please?
Yeah, I sure can. Thank you very much. I'm just very excited about this and very proud of this, that we're doing it, and that it will be the first permanent supportive housing on the east side. It's really great. Again, we've been working on this for a long time, and to bring to reality the things that we worked on and thought about and dreamed about in the affordable housing strategy in 2017. It's just exciting to see this, and the work that's been done to put all this together. And again, sometimes you look at different places and all, and something kind of comes together, and it's kind of magical that we're doing it at this place along with the temporary housing and shelter. So I'm just very excited about it. I do want to comment that, yeah, the material stuff's gone up. I know that a 6-foot 2x4 is tripled from about $2.50 to almost $6 or more. So the cost of all of this is great, but at the same time, I think we're getting at a point where this is going to be something that we will be what's going to change Bellevue in a very, very positive way, and to change lives for these men in a way that we've been talking about, and now we're actually going to help on that. So I'm just very pleased with this, and let's get that $400K to finish this off, and really looking forward again to the groundbreaking to celebrate that the city of Bellevue is really stepping out and saying that we're not only, talking, but we're walking the talk. And this is exciting. So I'm ready to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
I'm ready to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I also support the project. I appreciate the fact that that this is based on referrals from the East Side for folks coming into supportive housing. I did have a couple of questions when you talked about the baseline staffing has been secured. Does that mean that we might need to provide additional funding so that the very services that are needed for the folks that are staying in these units, that as we look forward, there may be a need for that enhanced service funding? So that's one of my questions. And then I appreciate seeing that there are sustainability elements with the energy code. So to the degree possible, if there are other sustainability elements that could be implemented so that as we look at the total cost of ownership, that we're not only looking at first cost, but the operation and maintenance and long-term sustainability as well, because this building is going to be around for many, many years. And if we're trying to get to net zero by 2050, this building's certainly going to be there by that time. And then lastly, as we think about the building of this, to the degree that we're able to bring on diverse businesses to be building, as well as workforce development, which we talk a lot about in Bellevue, to be able to have apprentices on these 3 projects. I think that would be an important part of bringing in the whole view of the council vision of sustainability, workforce development, as well as supporting the very population that we're trying to help. So thank you.
Do you want to respond to the question if it will take additional funding to pay for the services beyond what we're being asked today?
Yes, absolutely. So the baseline staffing model, which Plymouth has successfully used to operate many projects already in their portfolio, does provide that 24/7 on-site staffing and as well as case management. And then often they will have to connect people to additional medical and clinical services at other locations. I know they have expressed interest in partnering with CFH to be able to apply for some future city funding considerations to be able to bring behavioral and mental health services to the campus so that it is there present on site. But they do believe they can successfully operate for just at a minimum with the funding that they have secured now and be able to have a successful project just with that.
That's great. I mean, if there is that additional need, our 1590 money is certainly one of the focus is on the behavioral and mental health. And maybe we can have a separate conversation to understand about the workforce development and the sustainability elements. Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said before, we're really lucky to have Arch in the regional coalition working on this topic. And it takes lots of work and proven infrastructure and people to put those together. We know that, Kirkland, has Sophia Way taking up the women's housing project. And then we know Redmond has, for the young people. And Bellevue, is doing this for men. This is the biggest and most challenging project we put together. But really this demonstrates the wholeness of how to work on this homeless problem. And this is really the pinnacle. I think we are completing this homeless situation in a way, we have a long way to go, obviously, but at least we're doing the right way. So thank you. This is something that we are very lucky, fortunate. One thing I just want to mention, when we were briefed on this issue before, I'm very impressed with the people, Plymouth Housing, working on it. And I'm impressed with the management, with their vision. The only thing I mentioned to our staff is that we want to be sure this philosophy, this management continues. This doesn't just happen now because we have the people who are supporting it, but when we go down the line, suddenly it may change. So I want to be sure we have some muscle in our agreement with the service providers, with management, that we can have some teeth in enforcing our vision, our goal that's set, on a sustainable way. So, I'm very grateful the staff is making sure that will be the case. Thank you. So I support it.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I support the supplemental funding for similar reasons in terms of need, but also because I think it's going to be key to the site's overall success. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. So good comments, good conversation. I also support the funding. I think that this is a really important project, and I am so pleased that Plymouth is the one that's going to be doing the first supportive housing project. They have really shown how, at least to date, how you can partner with the neighborhood, how you can partner with other shelters to make sure that this supportive housing project works really well for the men and women and children who may live in it, as well as for the homeless folks who are coming there from shelters, and how it can be a good neighbor to the affordable housing next door and to the greater neighborhood. So I'm really pleased with that. But since this is the first, I think that it's really important that we develop a set of, whether it's a checklist or conditions in agreements when we're funding, to make sure that every supportive housing project that comes to Bellevue, because we know this is only the first, not the last, are done in a way that really works well to help people get moved out of homelessness into stability. And I think that we just need to keep in mind that I agree this one's going to be done really well, but there's been some that haven't been so well. There's supportive housing projects in Seattle that are the most dangerous block in terms of medical and police calls in the city of Seattle. We don't want that type of thing to happen in Bellevue. So I really would like to hear from staff, not necessarily tonight, but before we take action on the contract, on the grant contract, on what kinds of information will be in there to make sure that the promises that Plymouth has made will continue, that they will continue to be living up to them moving forward. And also, I think that the reason I want to do that isn't so much because of Plymouth. It's just, begin as you want to go on, I always say. So I want to make sure that we have a grant agreement and condition expectations for the next supportive housing project. And this is one that I fully expect to not just help with the capital funding today, or when we vote on this in a couple of weeks, but for some of the operational funding moving forward with the behavioral health. We want this to be one that is really, really successful, so that when we're bringing more to the east side, whether in Bellevue or in some of our neighboring cities, people know how well it can be done and how effective it can be and how it will work for the people who are living there and surroundings. So I talked at length to Emil and Lindsay today. They provided me some excellent information. I don't know if either of you want to weigh in on this request, but I just would like some more information on the terms of the agreement before we actually pass it. But I'm absolutely in favor of doing this and making sure that it's done well so that it's a model for the next one.
What was the last thing you said about what you want before we pass this?
I'd like
the terms of the agreement.
Yeah, terms of the agreements and the conditions of the grant agreement, so that we could. I've seen some of the terms in terms of one term in terms of the coordinated entry for all. I think it's really important that they be committed to taking Bellevue residents from the Bellevue shelters. But there's also the accountability, the safety security plan, the good neighbor participation, which they've all done and they have bought into. But I'd like to see how that's going to be put into the grant funding, whether it's in this agreement or if we're funding them for operations in that agreement. Because I just think it's really important that we have an expectation.
So I just want to make clear that you're kind of putting a contingency on your yes vote for this funding, that you wouldn't vote for this without, pardon?
We're not voting on it tonight. We're just voting.
Well, we're voting to bring it back for a vote. So when it comes back, your vote is contingent on that information.
I want to get that information before we vote.
Is there if I may, Lindsay or Emil, are you able to comment on Councilmember Robertson's questions?
Yeah, I can start off and then hand it over to Lindsay. So we had a excellent conversation with Councilmember Robertson this afternoon, and think we understand some of the topics that she's looking for information on. So we're happy to list out some of the provisions in the draft funding agreements to satisfy Councilmember Robertson's request, as well as elaborate a little bit on how operational provisions are put in place and then renewed over time as well. So Lindsay, you want to elaborate any more on things that we could bring back for Councilmember Robertson's review?
I think you've covered it well, and would be happy to go into detail. I think some of what's in the contract will address that accountability over time, the things that we are set up to monitor. It may not cover the gamut of details related to the additional agreements with campus partners that the city and Arch are not a party to, but happy to provide what's in our draft contract.
I think the entire council is going to be interested in seeing that. So maybe that can be in the packet before you bring this back. And if anybody wants to have a staff discussion on before a briefing before the next meeting, maybe that could be included in it. And Councilmember Robertson, of course, you're invited to join in on that so you can get the information in advance.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that since this is the first, that we set the bar high and move it forward. So yeah, but I'm all in favor of funding this.
Thank you. Well, this has been a really thoughtful discussion, and I so appreciate hearing my fellow council members' thoughts on this. I've been on the Mental Illness Drug Dependency Oversight Committee for over 5 years, and looking at the annual reports each year, I can tell you that it doesn't matter how much money you put into helping people who are homeless. If they are not housed, they cannot be helped. They have a very, very single-digit success rate. However, if they are housed and they receive the services, the success rate is in the 90s. It's just unbelievable, the difference. And it's so important to me that we have those services. And I think what Councilmember Robertson is alluding to is that, maybe we should make that a requirement, that part of the project is going to include on-site services, or at least access nearby same-day services to these populations so that they have the best chance of success. And that's probably going to cost more. And I do hope that Plymouth comes back and asks us for more money, 1590 money, to pay for the services that we need to make this a successful program for those involved. And that's what that money is for. So I know I'm echoing my fellow council members' thoughts on this, but I totally agree. And I'm very supportive of the supportive housing request going on here. And so let's call for the vote. Deputy Mayor, do you have a motion you can make?
I do indeed. I move to direct staff to prepare legislation approving the funding recommendation for the Eastgate supportive housing for final action at a future meeting.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, now.
Mayor,
Oh, yes.
I want to understand this last issue is not, you're not suggesting this be decided one way or other when we decide on this proposal that we're voting, that we've been presented with. It sounded a little bit like you wanted to expand on what Councilmember Robertson was saying, and maybe
in the future, I would like to look into that, but I'm not attaching that to my vote on this project. However, Councilmember Robertson would like to have more information before that vote, and I think we would all like to have that information.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just gets into a certain extent of roles, but yes, I agree. Just want to make sure. But
so, Deputy Mayor,
point in making sure on her part. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to hand the gavel over to you, the virtual gavel, and I'm actually going to hang up, and I'm going to let the clerk call me when you are done.
Great. Thank you,
later.
Mayor. All right. Mr. King, can we proceed?
We may proceed. May I please call for the PowerPoint to reappear? We'll go one slide before that, please. Slide 15. Thank you. So the third request that we're going to be talking about tonight is for the Illahi Apartments acquisition. I wanted to just spend a moment orienting council to this request. The Illahi Apartments is located on the south side of Bell Red Road, just east of 140th Avenue Northeast. It's right near Highland Park and Community Center. You can see that it is within the Bell Red sub area, which is that green area on the map. And it's also just outside of the half-mile walk shed from the future 130th light rail station. So the apartments are good proximity to light rail, and they're also close walking distance down 140th to the bus rapid transit on Northeast 8th Street. Next slide, please. The people often ask me, what does Illahi mean? So Illahi, it means earth or country in the native language Chinook Wawa. So that's the meaning of the word. The Illahi Apartments is a 36-unit project. It's in generally good condition, spread over 7 buildings as it stands now. It's a mix of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. So the concept here is that this project would be preserved for affordable housing. It's what we call naturally occurring affordable housing right now. The average rents for the project are $1,378, which is below the market rents in Bellevue and the Eastside. It's in an area of Bell Red where redevelopment is occurring. I think many council members will notice quite a few of the older commercial buildings on the south side of Bell Red Road are being torn down for new townhouse development. So this property was initially marketed as a redevelopment opportunity by the property owner. The King County Housing Authority took action to acquire the project that will preserve the housing and prevent displacement of Bellevue families. So I'm going to let Lindsay go into a little bit more detail on the Housing Authority's plans for the project, and then some details of the ask of the city.
Great. So as you heard, this was sort of an immediate opportunity to take something that was on the market and likely to be demolished and residents displaced, and to preserve it. And in addition to that, the King County Housing Authority has developed a very compelling vision about how they will utilize the property going forward, both to meet some really immediate current needs and also provide some long-term housing opportunities. In the period of time that they've been holding on to the property, they've been able to create priorities for families who are referred through the Bellevue School District and youth Eastside services, families who are experiencing homelessness and would benefit from stable low-income housing. So they prioritize some referrals into the currently vacant units. And then in the long term, they have a goal to convert the property to public housing and be able to access deep federal housing subsidies that will be able to bring public housing parameters to the project. This will enable the project to serve people with extremely low incomes, people who are most likely at risk of homelessness, either paying over 50% of their income towards housing, or who have other risk factors for homelessness. So really creating that deeply affordable housing. In the interim, they are allowing all of the current residents to stay, and they will not be requiring anybody to relocate to make sure that no one is displaced. Go to the next slide. Arch was happy to help review this request sort of outside of the typical annual funding process that we do. And I think this was presented as a really timely opportunity to leverage the Housing Authority's ongoing work in partnership with Amazon. So the Housing Authority has been able to secure a commitment from Amazon of $4 million with the request to the city to match that and provide another $4 million. The remaining $2.8 million that is needed to make up the total acquisition financing would be contributed by the Housing Authority, either from its own equity or from other funding sources that they may go out and seek. They would also be pledging to ensure that future funding for any renovation that's needed to happen also does not come from the city, but comes from another funding source. So in summary, this is, I think, a compelling opportunity to make an immediate impact right here in Bellevue, providing some housing opportunities for families with immediate needs, as well as creating long-term, deeply affordable housing with a permanent federal operating subsidy. And I think we are seeking your direction now to bring this back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you, Lindsay, for the presentation. I'm sure we're all going to want to weigh in on this, so I'll go in this order then. Lee, Robertson, Stokes, Barksdale, and Zahn. So Councilmember Lee, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you. Thank you. I believe that, as we discussed before, this is all very important, necessary, and I'm glad that Arch is also, working on this. This is right in line. We did, one apartment before. I don't remember the exact name. The one question I have is in the previous discussion, on affordable housing, we talked before. We know we have funding available, and it's something that we are committed to do. This is something that I am not quite sure about the funding of $4 million. So I support it, but I want to be sure that our city is, positioned not to do that. We are not adversely impacted. We have to choose priorities and so on. And so perhaps if the city manager can say, where's the funding source? Are we prepared to handle this? What would be our financial impact on the rest of our priority for the city? That would be good to know. But I support this concept. I'm just wondering about, the money. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond to that, Deputy Mayor?
Please do. Please do.
Yeah. So it was outlined in the front of the presentation, Councilmember Lee, in terms of the sources of funding. These monies that are being recommended to spend are undesignated at this point, set up for this very specific purpose for affordable housing. In addition, I did want to mention that we also included in the balance of the money that we showed the council. What was not included in there was the HB 1590 money, as well as the 1403 money. So there's additional monies in addition to what we have in the bank right now. Does that answer is there any questions, Councilmember Lee?
Yes, so that includes the adequate funding for this project.
Yes, yeah, correct, there is.
Thank you. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Robertson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm supportive of this 100%. I think it's great. So this is exactly the kind of thing we were hoping to use 1590 and other of these resources for. I do have a question that I don't think was in the packet or in the presentation. What is the AMI level that will King County Housing Authority run this? Who's going to operate it? To what is the AMI level that we're going to set for this? And then I have a couple of questions about additional money. So those are my start 2 questions.
I'd be happy to answer that. And those are really great and important questions. I also wanted to make sure to thank Stephen Norman, Executive Director for the King County Housing Authority. I know he was in the audience and had hoped to provide public comment, but wasn't able to get a spot. So he will hopefully welcome back at the next meeting. So this project will be owned and operated by KCHA. They obviously are an experienced large housing provider in the nation. They have a commitment again to be able to accommodate the current residents to stay in the property. So we have a bit of a sort of two layers within our sort of ongoing covenant conditions, some with respect to the current residents and that future long-term goal to be able to serve people from the public housing waitlist. So immediate term, before that federal housing subsidy is turned on, we would not be having additional income restrictions, but once those federal subsidies are brought in, there would be eligibility that matches up with the eligibility for public housing. That is almost always families with household income less than 30% of the median income.
Okay, so 30, so that's good. And I'm really pleased it's going to prioritize the homeless students and families for Bellevue. I know that the value here is $300,000 a unit. And I assume that's because the land value is greater than the improvement value because it's subject to redevelopment. My question is, will there be additional funds either that will be asked from Bellevue to do renovation to these facilities? Do they need renovating or updating? I know you said they were in really good shape. So that's my second question.
To answer that as well. So I think we do know that the property does require some renovation. They're currently, of course, habitable and everything right now. They have several units that were affected by a fire, and they're in the process of bringing those back online. But there are some longer term sort of capital needs that they will probably have to address. They have pledged to the city that they would not be coming back to Bellevue for that funding. They would go seek that from other funding programs.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering my questions, and I 100% support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Councilmember Stokes?
Yeah, this is, I'm just looking up the little sign up here. This is Highland Village 2. I mean, really exciting that we have this opportunity, and it fits right in with our plans we've talked for a long time about not only finding more new affordable housing, but keeping the stock that we have. And that's such an important concept. And we need, you know, there are more of them going down now. So it's good to have this particular one go forward. And I appreciate the comments and questions that Councilmember Robertson asked about this. And I think that this is going to be another success story. And again, it's the partnership, and I really appreciate your work on this and having Arch really kind of more integrated and working with us on this whole project, you know, all the affordable housing pieces as it goes, and work from the staff has been superb on this. So I'm excited about it. Let's just get it done. And actually, us putting $4 million in is fairly small in terms of the impact it's going to have. So I'm ready to go. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. All right, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I support this funding, the supplemental funding. I think it's also pretty awesome that we're not going to be displacing residents, and to that end, preventing the possibility of people experiencing homelessness. So I support it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Councilmember Barksdale. And Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I too support this project. It is Highland Village too. And I love the fact that this is preservation, and it's prioritizing Bellevue families. And it's also really a public-private partnership, right? So Amazon is putting in $4 million, and they're looking for a match from the city. So we would be looking for a lot more money, but for the partnership with our business community. So I think this is definitely a win-win-win. The other part is, I understand in reading the packet that 3.4 million, was this the one that our funding is coming from the fee in lieu? Is that correct? So that would also allow us to keep the money that we collected in Bellred to invest back in Bellred. So that really makes sense to me. I guess my question is, on the fee in lieu, what percentage of AMI do we build with the fee in lieu monies? I mean, certainly this would be well within it because it's 30% AMI. So that was one of my questions. And then as I thought about the 1590 money versus our affordable housing CIP, the 60% AMI is the 1590 money. The affordable housing CIP is unrestricted. So just being cognizant of using the monies that are the best fit for this, because, you know, we want to be able to save the money that we have that's unrestricted, to be able to, you know, perhaps look at the 65% AMI, because the multifamily tax exemption only gets us to 65% and not down to 60. So I guess I just want to make sure that as we look at the funding buckets for the 4 million, that we're using the buckets that are the most applicable for this project and the AMI level that it is. Does that make sense? My question, it was a bit of a long-winded one.
Yeah, I can, if it's okay with the Deputy Mayor, I can briefly answer this one. Bel-Red projects that do on-site performance for affordable housing typically produce those at the 80% AMI level. So these monies come into the city when a developer chooses on their own behalf not to do that. So as Lindsay said, this might be able to actually get some 30% AMI units eventually in the Bel-Red area, and that's consistent with policy direction for a range of AMI levels in Bel-Red. And once we get council direction tonight on funding these 3 requests, then we'll work with the city manager and his staff on the best buckets of money to use to retain the most flexibility in the future.
Okay, that would be great, because I would like us to, you know, use the funds that are the most restricted that this fits into versus the affordable housing CIP, which doesn't have the same level of restrictions that come from the state for 1590, for example. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Yeah, this is just fantastic, and preserving affordable housing is just as important to this council, I believe, as creating more additional housing, affordable housing. So, you know, I want to thank the county for moving so quickly on this. I want to thank Amazon continuing to show they're a great partner for this city, as it preserves more affordable homes here, prevents displacement of existing Bellevue residents. And I did actually have a question on that. Is it set up that we would prioritize families that have kids in the Bellevue school district right now? I know we do. I believe I saw in here, we do prioritize families with immediate housing opportunity, but do we prioritize those that have kids and those that are in the Bellevue school district? Emil, I don't know if you can answer that, or Lindsay.
Sure, Emil, I can go ahead. So during this period of time where they have flexibility outside of the federal regulations that will come with public housing subsidy, they are absolutely prioritizing 100% of those vacancies for that referral. Great. Once those federal subsidies then are turned on, they are going to try to achieve that priority as best they can within the public housing referral criteria.
Wonderful. And then my second question just quickly was, so the 2.8 million either coming from KCHA or another funding source. So do we have any concerns that, you know, that money is not already secured for this $10.8 million acquisition?
I don't have concerns about that. KCHA has shown its wherewithal to be able to leverage a significant amount of its own resources for acquisitions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, since I am chairing this section of the meeting tonight, I can't make the motion. So would one of my colleagues like to make the motion regarding this funding request?
I'm happy to, Deputy Mayor. I move to direct staff to prepare legislation approving the Illahi preservation request for council consideration and action at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it passes. All right. Well, with that, I think we can invite the mayor back into the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Mr. City Manager, did you want to move ahead and introduce the next item while we're waiting for the mayor to come back in, or did you want to wait?
Sure, I could go ahead and introduce Deputy Mayor if you'd like. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members, the next study session topic on your agenda this evening is an informational update on the city's transportation capital plan and an update on the levy funded projects. As council is aware, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, design and construction of infrastructure projects continued on in Bellevue. And since the last CIP levy update, several projects have been completed with many others in process. Tonight, staff will provide you with an update on the status of the many projects with a focus on our major capital projects and projects funded through the Neighborhood Safety, Connectivity, and Congestion Management Levy. Tonight's presentation is informational, and there's no formal direction that is being sought of the council this evening. With that, joining me this evening is Ron Kessick, Assistant Director, and John Murphy, Senior Planner, both from the Transportation Department. That I'll go ahead and turn over to you, Ron.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Noonhouse, and council members. I must say that we're just very happy to continue sharing the good news tonight. This is really exciting stuff, and we're happy to keep the good news coming. Tonight's presentation is information only, and we do have a lot of good news to share with you. On the agenda tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about how we manage construction through the COVID pandemic. We will be providing updates on some of our major capital projects, as well as an update on all of the levy projects that we are working on and have completed during the pandemic. And then I will wrap up with a big thank you to kind of the unsung heroes that kept things going through this COVID pandemic for us. I want to take a step back in time to the early days of COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders. There were lots of questions that we needed answers to in a very short manner, not the least of which was the determination that the public work that we do was considered essential in nature, and we needed to keep our projects going as a result, which also resulted in an immediate need to protect not only our staff, but also our contractors and the public during a time when the supply of materials for doing so, the personal protective equipment, were in very short supply. Things like masks, hand wash stations, hand sanitizer were extremely difficult to find. At one point, I even had my wife sewing masks for our staff so that we could continue work and our staff could continue to work in the public in a safe manner. Like everybody else who ended up working from home, we also had to figure out how to continue our collaborative design processes to keep our projects going, working with all of the city departments who provide input to our projects. And we needed to meet the public requirements for things like how we advertise our projects for design and construction, and how we conduct public bid openings to meet state law. All of these things we had to address in a very short manner, very short time frame to keep our work going. All of our projects followed the direction and the guidance from state and the county to assure the safety of the public, our contractors, and our staff. Very early on, we worked with the city attorney's office to provide early guidance as to the essential status of our projects to our contractor groups, and worked with labor and industries and others to provide direction to our contractors to enable them to rapidly take steps to continue work. Some of our contractors even commented back that they appreciated so much our early efforts on to provide them with positive guidance so that they could continue to work. It's really important to note that the contractors were eager to help in our efforts. They wanted to continue work and wanted to continue to provide employment to their staff. On all of our projects, we included new requirements for COVID protection as part of our contract and permit conditions. We reached out to local agencies, public works departments, and other agencies to establish a network that enabled all of us to talk through policy and procedure questions that came up from time to time and act as a sounding board for each other for any issues that arose during the pandemic. Working with the state, we were able to produce a bid process opening online using Zoom that provided a safe environment for submittals and the required public forum for bid openings. And certainly in one respect, I would have to say the pandemic greatly aided construction in that the reduction of traffic was really a boon to construction efforts. And we were able to do a lot more work under the lower traffic volumes. Fortunately, due to the efforts of our staff, our contractors, and others, the impacts of COVID to our projects was very minimal. Looking back to December, Council adopted a capital budget of $234 million over the 7-year time period for the Transportation Department. This represented 35% of the city's capital budget, with our TIFIA loan of $100 million being a substantial portion of that funding. Jumping right into TIFIA, during the COVID period, we were able to complete a couple TIFIA-related projects. We completed zones 1 and 2 of Spring Boulevard, which opened up the pathway from the downtown to the Spring District into the Bellred area with a brand new roadway, pedestrian and bike amenities. We completed design efforts on Spring Boulevard Zone 4, which is right adjacent to the 130th station and the 130th Park and Ride, and the 124th Northeast 12th, the Spring Boulevard project, which will continue work on the 124th corridor, the second of 3 projects expanding capacity and improving pedestrian and bike facilities on that corridor as well. Those 2 projects are just getting ready to add. They're being reviewed by the State Department of Transportation for certification of right-of-way. And once we get that, we will be running those projects to add and beginning construction shortly thereafter. We are also finalizing design on the last 2 TIFIA projects, the 124th Ichigo to Northup, the final project on the 124th corridor, and the 130th corridor from Bellred to Northeast 20th. Both increasing capacity and providing needed pedestrian and bike improvements in the Bellred corridor to support the development activity that is actually currently underway. Those projects will begin construction in 2022. We're in the middle of right-of-way acquisition right now. We are excited also to let you know that during this process, we have been watching interest rates and attended a conference led by the U.S. Department of Transportation Build America Bureau on refinance options for our TIFIA loan. Based upon that, we have applied for a TIFIA refinance. It's essentially the same process that we went through to get the original TIFIA loan. Been working with the Build America Bureau staff on that. All of our materials have been submitted, and are hopeful that should interest rates stay low and it continues to show a benefit to refinance our TIFIA loan, we hope to close in the next month or 2. Council will need to take a couple actions on this. Next week, you will see an action to fund the legal review of the TIFIA loan, which is a requirement from the US DOT for any TIFIA loan, standard practice. We have the funding available to do so, and you will see action on that requested next week. And again, should interest rates continue to stay low and continue to show a benefit, you will see a new bond ordinance for the refinanced TIFIA loan. Interest rates are very low right now, and if they continue to remain low, the intent is to save millions of dollars over the life of the repayment cycle of the TIFIA loan. Taking a quick look at some of our major capital projects, we were very excited to open up the first phase of the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail from I-405 to 132nd Avenue, with a new bridge over Factoria Boulevard and a new tunnel under the freeway off-ramps to Factoria Boulevard. And get a good start on phase 2 of the Mountains to Sound Greenway, which will continue work from 132nd Avenue over to 142nd Avenue and the crossing over to Bellevue College. That work is really excited the community. We ended up with a very fantastic looking project, and we're very excited for phase 2 work. We are also on the final stages of our Newport Way project. You may recall that this project was very important to the community. The community has been after this project for many, many years, actually well before the city annexed this area. The community is working with King County to try and get the pedestrian and cycle improvements needed out on the section between Somerset Boulevard and 150th Avenue, and the county was unable to fund that project at the time. Council funded this project, and this is also a great example of the combination of capital funding and levy funding to speed up project delivery. And we are just finishing up this project, and I know a number of council members are going to join us at the grand opening on July 30th at 1 o'clock out at the community center along Newport Way. We have also made great progress on the Westlake Sammamish Parkway Phase 2 project. This project enhances the transportation elements that were already in place by providing greater safety and some separated pedestrian and bicycle facilities, as well as bike lanes on the parkway. This is a joint project with the Utilities Department, where we are also installing water main down Westlake Sammamish Parkway and into adjacent neighborhoods using a new technology. This is earthquake resistant ductile iron pipe, which provides a great deal of resiliency in a very sensitive area and very substantial water main. It serves not only this area, but actually extends down into Issaquah as well. I'd certainly be remiss if we didn't talk about the Northeast 12th Street multipurpose path. This was a project of great concern in the community, and is a project that connects pedestrian and bicycle facilities to the Bellred area via the improvements made on Spring Boulevard Zones 1 and 2, and also the 108th Avenue bike facilities project that John will be talking about when we talk about the Levy projects coming up. We're very excited about the completion of this project, which includes a widened sidewalk pathway area, as well as a widened planting bed adjacent to the street, so that the trees have room to grow and expand without heaving the sidewalks and heaving the roadway as they were before. We have completed many, many more projects under the overlay program, pedestrian and bike improvements throughout the city, and projects under our major maintenance program, where we were replacing deficient rockeries with new walls in a couple different areas of the city. We do realize that COVID continues to be an ongoing concern. We will continue to enforce all COVID actions implemented by the state, the county, and labor and industries going forward. As had been mentioned previously, materials costs are all over the board these days. Councilmember Stokes mentioned the cost of lumber, and I have to tell you that lumber has been extremely volatile, as have several other commodity costs associated with our projects. We are monitoring those on a daily basis. We're also monitoring the availability of some of the projects that we use on our projects. Shipping delays are of concern, and we're monitoring that daily. We have two projects that we are watching due to utility locate issues, where a couple of utilities were either not located or mislocated, and we are working with the contractors on cost containment on those particular issues, in those particular projects going forward. And with that, I will hand off to John to talk about the Levy program.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening. I'm here to share some great news about our 2016 voter approved Neighborhood Safety, Connectivity, and Congestion Levy. This was a ballot measure that the voters approved in 2016 to increase their property taxes to really supplement a lot of our existing neighborhood and safety programs that we have funded in the city, recognizing that a lot of these existing programs have long backlogs of project needs that we just haven't been able to get to at the rate that we would like to. So the levy by design helps us to accelerate a lot of our existing program priorities and help to deliver in 6 key program areas. There's about $2 million a year raised for the express purposes of congestion reduction projects. That was a desire by the city council to specifically set aside an amount just for congestion reduction. And then the remaining approximately $6 million a year helps to fund sidewalk and trail maintenance projects, intelligent transportation projects, sidewalks, safety projects, and bike facilities. Next slide, please. My previous visits here, I had a look toward what is to come. We are 4 years or so into the project planning, design, and construction of this program. And I can now say that we've done a lot since the early months and years of this program. We've invested in every Bellevue neighborhood to the tune of $22+ million. We've completed over 51 projects. A lot of projects, as we'll go through a few examples tonight, are often not just a crosswalk. A project could mean 10 crosswalks. So the number of actual investments in our neighborhoods is likely greater than the 51 projects may indicate. And when the levy was passed, we really had to start from scratch. We had to start the design of a whole suite of projects. And we've gotten to a place of relative maturity in this funding stream that has us relative even flow of projects that are being designed and going out to construction. So we have a fairly robust project pipeline in place during the last few years. So to go through a few examples of some projects that have recently been completed, I won't go through every project that's been completed. I'll be here all night, though lots of great news to share. The first one is the project that Ron mentioned, the 108th Avenue Northeast Complete Streets project in our downtown spine. This is on one of our priority bicycle corridors that helps create a connection between the 2 regional trails that cut east-west in our city, the I-90 trail in the south and the SR 520 trail in the north. And right in the middle of those is our downtown area. This recently completed project is more than just a bike project, though. It has iterated on an earlier example where we had a proof of concept to see if we could reallocate some of the space to make it a little more comfortable for people biking. And that was kind of phase 1 of the project. This phase 2 of the project kind of went the extra mile and made the transit capacity and lane markings a bit more visible. It provided some conduit for some intelligent transportation system projects. And as you can see in the bottom right, really try to create a bit more separation for people biking through our downtown area. The levy has provided the opportunity to do some firsts in the city. Bellevue is home to a few WashDOT built roundabouts in the southeast corner of our city on Westlake Sammamish Parkway, but the levy has helped to fund 3 mini roundabouts. These are smaller in scale. They provide opportunity to reduce congestion at neighborhood porous points and also help reduce the severity of potential crashes and shortens crossing distance for people biking. So we get the kind of triple benefit of safety, congestion relief, and safety for people walking. as well. And the picture here is on the edge of our downtown at 100th and Northeast 10th Street. So to that end, we've really started to make some good progress on those congestion reduction projects. This was a wholly new program for us to formalize with the passage of the levy. As such, we had to kind of identify where those pain points were in our city. Where were people having trouble getting in or out of their neighborhood? So we went through a fairly robust round of evaluation and traffic studies to identify those places with the greatest need, to figure out where we could focus our investments. And fortunately, you all on the council are supportive of this work and passed some additional funding to help fund the construction of a lot of these projects that we were just able to study with the levy funding. The extra funding helps us to actually move some dirt and make some improvements. So the 5 locations that you see here are kind of in the design process right now. And this is in addition to the recently completed improvements at 150th Avenue Southeast and Newport Way, which was our first project to kind of get out the door to help ease congestion in the Eastgate area. So the 112th Avenue Northeast Improvements Project, that is under construction right now. This is from Northeast 12th to Northeast 24th. This project is really emblematic of a lot of our levy projects, multiple benefits, multiple funding sources, and kind of, not necessarily site specific. If we're looking to build a signal at Northeast 24th and 112th, like we are at the Montessori School, that's a fairly significant disturbance. And as we were out there, we identified a lot of other kind of sidewalk needs to ensure that they are compliant with ADA. And the levy has really afforded the opportunity to tackle these disparate needs all at once, find one contractor to try to get the work done with as minimal impact as possible to the greatest benefit. So another project that I'm excited to share about is the Safe Routes to School project near Bellevue High School. This sidewalk project that is set to begin construction shortly provides a critical missing gap of sidewalk from Wolverine Way, where Bellevue High School is located, to Main Street to the north. And this is another example of collaboration internally in finding out that there is a sidewalk priority identified from the community, and also a traffic safety identified in the area as well. And the levy has helped force some of that collaboration internally to make sure that we're being kind of smart with the way we design, package, and build these projects. And I would expect this project to be complete through at the end of this year, 2021. And then another kind of long-awaited project. This is a project, and this is the one I mentioned that is actually 10 projects. This is a big crosswalk improvement job on Forest Drive, Camber Road, and 160th Avenue Southeast that is either building brand new crosswalks or existing crosswalks like you can see on Highland Drive. And while a lot of these projects are not expressly branded as a Vision Zero project per se, a lot of them have fairly obvious connections to the safety of people walking, biking, and driving. So they're really reinforcing that commitment to realize zero serious injuries and deaths on our streets by 2030, which is the goal of Vision Zero. And then finally, upcoming, this is kind of a lighter touch project out in the Northeast Bellevue and Lake Hills neighborhoods. It's the East Bellevue Demonstration Greenway that is looking to create a more comfortable environment for people walking and biking in the northeast part of the city. It offers a a 2-mile contiguous corridor that's just parallel to the 164th Avenue corridor, where we have lower traffic speeds and volumes, where it's inherently a little more comfortable to walk and bike. And with the treatment of some of these low-cost applications that you see here, we're helping to really reinforce that this is a corridor where that connects to parks and places, and makes it a little more comfortable for folks in the neighborhood. And then just on the horizon, another kind of hallmark of the levy is to be able to be as smart with the community's investment as we can be. To that end, we recently received notice of a Safe Routes to School grant in Northwest Bellevue that is connected to a larger sidewalk project along the 100th Avenue corridor. This is near Chinook Middle School and Clyde Hill Elementary School, and we received about $700,000 from the state to help build some of those pieces of sidewalk from the schools to 100th Avenue. Like I mentioned, the project pipeline is full. I'm just sharing a smattering of the projects that were recently completed or are on the horizon. So you'll continue to see those blue levy signs and our mailers that are branded with levy iconography to really show to the community that thank you for your vote, and we will continue to make investments in the neighborhood. At the end of this year, we're looking to put together a progress report to share with the wider community all the good news that we're sharing with you tonight.
And as I mentioned, I do want to thank our transportation staff who worked with our contractors, worked with the public throughout the pandemic, our capital projects inspectors, right-of-way use inspectors, streets and signals maintenance and operations staff, and certainly the Bellevue residents and businesses for their ongoing patience with all of the construction we have done. They've been terrific, they've been very helpful, and we couldn't do it without them. With that, we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you for that fantastic presentation. It's so fun to see all the fruits of your labors. And I'm sure there's a lot of comments and questions here. So why don't you go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll call on you if you have something you'd like to say. Councilmember Robertson, followed by Zahn and Neuenhouse and Stokes. Go ahead, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. I love this slide 24 with the people in the capes, because I think that really captures a lot of the people who've been involved in our transportation improvements. And this is one of those things that Bellevue does really well. We are taking money and using it where it's needed. We're continuing to improve, maintain and upgrade infrastructure, add new infrastructure. And we're also keeping an eye on the bottom line whether it comes to recasting bonds so that we get a better interest rate, so it allows us to do more projects and pay less interest, or whether it comes to managing project implementation. So I just wanted to raise my hand to really thank staff and this council for always making sure that we support funding of these kinds of projects, and the voters who, when we went out for a levy, it was the first levy we'd done in a long time. Councilmember Zahn and I think were on the pro committee for the ballot initiative for that transportation levy, and the people of Bellevue supported it, as well as the fire facilities levy. And we've been able to do really good things that I think matter and make Bellevue more livable. So, but we couldn't do it without all this great staff, and Ron and John and Andrew and all of the folks, the right-of-way inspectors, street maintenance, streets, signals and operations, etc., doing so much to make this city shine. And there's a reason we won the the All-American City Award. It's because of attention to things like this. They may not be sexy, but they really, really matter. So thanks.
Councilmember Zahn, was it you next or Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I was next. Thank you,
Okay,
Mayor.
go ahead.
I agree, Ron. This is tough work to manage construction and make sure we do it with as least impact as possible. And the fact that Bellevue was able to keep the construction going and not end up with COVID cost over time is to be commended. So thank you very much for that, and keeping our inspectors and all the construction workers safe as well, especially in the beginning when there really weren't any good guidance or how to keep construction going. I did have a couple of items as I was thinking about the Levy projects. You know, what I really like about that program is the amount of community engagement. I remember going to so many community discussions where you had the chartboard up there, and some you even had the table with little cars so that people could really see what things look like and what are some options for, is it a signal, is it a crosswalk, is it better queuing? So really appreciate the level of engagement there. What I'm wondering is, do we come back afterwards and do some kind of a satisfaction survey to get a sense for how that's working? And then my other question was around, I'm glad we're doing some roundabouts, because, you know, studies have shown that just the act of having to go around the roundabout means the speeds are reduced and pedestrians are safer as well as cars. So are we going to get a Vision Zero report of some kind that really looks at the kind of projects that we're investing in around Vision Zero, both from the Levy funding as well as perhaps the broader CIP? So that was my second question. And then my last one is, this is amazing that we're going through a refi on the TIFIA, because the more money, well, the less we have to pay in interest, the more money we have to spend on other things instead of debt. What I wanted to understand is, when is the payback start? I thought it was a certain number of years after the last projects were complete. So I wondered if you could comment on that part of it. So that was it.
Certainly, and let me take your questions in order. You asked a question about a follow-up survey or a follow-up review with the community on completion of our projects. On our major capital projects, yes, we do go back out to the community and get feedback on how things went. And we, you know, get everything from, you know, I appreciate the construction, I hated the traffic impacts, to, you know, just across the board in comments. And we do try and incorporate those comments, you know, those thoughts into future projects and future outreach. Second question in regards to a Vision Zero report. You know, Vision Zero is still pretty new. And as John mentioned, our projects have Vision Zero related impacts. You know, we design projects with safety in mind. We design projects, you know, to improve pedestrian and cycle safety as well as vehicular safety. And, you know, as Vision Zero rolls out more thoroughly as a program in and of itself, we do need to take a look at all of those elements and report back on all of those projects that provide those safety measures that work towards the Vision Zero objective that council wants and the community wants. So yes, I do think we need an annual report of sorts that does that, to be able to report back to council. Lastly, on the TIFIA payback start, if my feeble memory is correct, it's 2024 for the first payment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, great presentation, Ron, John, really appreciate it. And you know, Andrew had his hand in this as well. So thank you all for all the great news. I mean, what's not to like, right? Improved capacity, improved safety, connectivity improvements, pedestrian and bicycle facility. I mean, this is all really good stuff. So thank you so much. My first question is around, and I think Ron, you just mentioned about, you know, pivoting during COVID, having to change your operations and processes. I'm just curious, were you able to move quicker through COVID? And will you keep any of the maybe key learnings or maybe process improvements that you had to shift to because of COVID? Will you keep that going now in order to move some of these projects along even quicker than before? I'm just curious.
That's an interesting question. One of well, a substantial number of the benefits realized were due to a reduction in traffic volumes on our streets. And, you know, that helps in so many different ways. It helps in traffic control and reduction of traffic control costs and labor hours.
Yeah.
It helps in the hauling of materials to and from. Things like concrete trucks, not having to wait in traffic and being able to make more timely rounds to a construction site and back to the plant, et cetera. The interesting thing will be to see how the community handles telework and things like that going forward. Are we going to see a return to, you know, previous traffic volumes where, you know, we're dealing with significant traffic throughout the city, or are the traffic volumes going to be reduced? I can tell you that, you know, on 405, anybody that goes on 405, traffic volumes on 405 are pretty nasty again.
Yeah.
And, but we're not seeing that totally reflected on city streets yet. And so maybe, you know, this whole telework opportunity will benefit us on our projects going forward. It's certainly something to watch for. And I think as far as COVID goes and the practices of hygiene and cleanliness on job sites and stuff like that is sure something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Just in the sharing of equipment, sharing of vehicles, that type of thing.
Yeah. Indeed.
Interesting question though. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate you answering it. And then a second question for John. So, John, you know, I'm a bike guy, and I love seeing all these improvements to our bike facilities. I just wanted to ask you about the East Bellevue, the demonstration greenway there, and the bicycle pavement markings that you're looking to do there on 165th, correct? I'm just wondering, because I see cyclists on 164th quite a bit. It's more of a direct shot. Yes, it is much more frequently traveled, but it's also a street that, you know, if someone lives on the west side of the street, they have to cross the street in order to get their mail, which is a little bit dangerous, increasingly dangerous as we see traffic start to increase again. There's limited sidewalks there. So I'm just trying to understand why the decision to move to 165th. Is that really just from a less traffic or congestion perspective and safety perspective, or what is the plan for 164th, which, you know, granted, this is, you know, kind of my neighborhood, and this is a street that I hear more and more about that we need to make some improvements on. So maybe not the whole stretch of 164th, but there are some certain areas, especially that are so close to so many schools as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And I think the way we're looking at this corridor is that it doesn't preclude any other future investment,
sure.
Specifically on 164th, because we've heard some of those comments from the community as well in some of our early outreach on this demonstration greenway. There is some funding in the levy to take a more comprehensive look at overall bike connectivity on that 164th spine that would be in addition to this greenway that's really meant for, you know, kind of all ages and abilities. You probably won't see that bike commuter that's, you know, going from Cougar Mountain to Microsoft on this route, right? But this facility does help encourage folks of all abilities, and those legends just help provide the wayfinding along the way, because it does kind of wig and wag as our street isn't perfectly north-south. So more to come on 164th. This project does build on the Healthy Streets pilot project that the city undertook last year during COVID to provide a little more separation or more space for people to travel. This was the corridor where we actually got some of the best feedback from the community. Kind of to Councilmember Zahn's point about evaluation, we did some follow-up surveys on the Healthy Streets pilot, and we saw an increase in use on where we're planning to do this demonstration Greenway, in addition to kind of favorable remarks. And that's something that it's really a hallmark of this project moving forward, that we will, it's a demonstration because it's kind of a new type of facility for Bellevue. So we want to see how the community responds to it. So we'll be doing continuous community feedback as we roll it out.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. And again, great presentation. Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thanks very much, the staff and the presentation. I mean, it's just amazing. I think the variety, there's a lot of good questions, and how we're doing these things, I think, have been brought up, and I agree with those. And I think looking back on this, it just, and for the public to understand too, is good. That the things we do, and I'm looking at two projects particularly that are exciting. One is the sidewalks neighborhoods problem, under the Levy issue, and we looked at that, and it's amazing how much in a little neighborhood that doesn't have a sidewalk, how excited they are when you have a sidewalk. And I remember going out to one of the first openings of a celebration of completion was on a neighborhood, I can't remember the name right now, on 148th, right south of Northeast, on Northeast 8, yeah, that area. And, they were just really excited about it. They talked about how it makes it so more accessible, how they can get on the road, how they can get around their neighborhood. And they just really were appreciative of the whole thing. And then on the other end, and that was in 2000 and right after the levy, somewhere in there. And then you go back to 2016, and on the other end of the spectrum, what did we do? We got really audacious and said, let's go get a TIFIA loan. And we got millions of dollars out of that. I mean, those two pieces, I think, are bookmarks of how we're approaching the whole connectivity, transportation, livability, and all these pieces together. And it's just exciting to be a part of that. And I think, again, to give staff kudos for initiating a lot of this, and for the council for coming up and agreeing to do a levy at that time. We hadn't done something like this. The only one was the Parks one, which, by the way, we need to work on. And to have the foresight and the get up and go to say, let's do these two pieces. And we went a little bit more than we actually talked about making the amount. And it has just been a tremendous success. And we have a long way to go on this, but the staff has, I think, just done an amazing job over the years of putting this together. And so I think we should give ourselves a real, pat on the back, but more pat on the back for the community, because they really embraced all this and supported this. And we just need to keep doing more of it. So the staff has just been great. Let's keep going. I'm excited about it and glad to hear the report. Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Staff has done a great job. As we know, transportation is a very important element of the community. Everything we do, every activities we have to go from here to there. It's transportation, and it affects us every day, especially during last year under the pandemic. We got stuck home for over a year. We realized, gee, how challenging it become. So it's really a very important, piece of what the city, government provides. And, I cut my teeth in politics and city through Transportation Commission. So I've always realized I have a love for, what you guys do. And you guys do a good job with federal government, state government, everything that we do, local projects. And so, that's just great. And I believe that this is something you guys are doing through this COVID period. Things have changed. People's behavior has changed. And we are seeing this, how it affected the community, the people, and our quality of life. So I think we can have a lot of information, observation from what you do on the ground to see how traffic pattern may have changed, how people's, changing of behavior. So I think that will give us a lot of good information. How do we structure, how do we take care of some of the way that we move? I think that's very important. So I have lots of confidence in what you guys do. One specific, so I really appreciate what you've done. And you have to be flexible, have to be adaptable, see what's going on, and you make it work. And I'm very impressed during, again, the pandemic. Projects going on. Nothing really has stopped. You just keep grinding. So under all that circumstances, you guys make it work. Question is, in northeast Bellevue, Redmond area, because of development from Redmond, development from Spring District, from Bellevue, there's a lot of pressures built on, again, that resulted in transportation, how people move. Has any been noticed during the pandemic? Whatever's happened, people's changing behavior, living, going to school, working at home. Have any thoughts on that? How are we going to address, or have you seen any change in traffic pattern, or how do we meet the needs of the Northeast Bellevue folks between Redmond and Bellevue?
Question. Yes, we have noticed, throughout the pandemic, much lighter volumes. Certainly, Microsoft's staff working from home and had a significant influence on the volume of traffic out there throughout the day. How they and how the community reacts to a post-COVID environment is actually going to be a really fascinating study of, sociology, psychology, as well as transportation. What does, this pandemic mean for things like a telework environment and for commuting? We've heard businesses that are all over the board in how they are approaching a post-pandemic work attitude with their staff. We've heard everything from you will be, reporting to work in the office, to we're going to be much more open with a telework policy, and you may have to come in once a week, or perhaps not even that. And so how that rolls out over the next 6 months, year, maybe even a little bit longer, it may have a significant influence on transportation. And I can't begin to give you an answer other than we are going to be watching it very closely, because it certainly may have an impact on how we approach our capital program in the future. It's in some ways it's kind of exciting. It's a different world. It's going to be totally different than, or has the chance of being totally different than it was a year ago.
Yeah, that's why we are so thankful for you guys. You have such a great attitude. I mean, your work in the neighborhood, talking to folks, doing neighborhood projects, small projects to big projects, all these things have been giving you the opportunity, right, to interact with the folks, and then give us firsthand, before we even know about it, how we can plan our future. So thank you very much. Keep up the good work, and thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it short. So thank you for the briefing. I actually am really excited about the projects and looking forward to taking my bike out on them and walking along those sidewalks. I think post-COVID, hybrid return to work or remote work will likely mean we have to do more to attract people to Bellevue. And so my question was going to be, how are we thinking about or testing amenities along these bike ped routes and as a way to encourage people to use them and activate those spaces?
That's an exciting question. And that's a question that goes well beyond the transportation department and involves staff from community development and development services. How do we activate the right-of-way? You know, in the past, the right-of-way has been looked at as, you know, the quickest possibility from point A to point B. It's not really that way anymore. Things like pocket parks, things like, you know, gathering places in unopened, unimproved rights of way. Those opportunities are kind of ripe for the picking. You know, we do have in Bellevue a fair amount of opportunity for improvements in unopened, unimproved rights of way. Street ends that end at lakes that are right of way, city property, that provide an opportunity for a little mini park that you know ends at a lake. You know, those things are really kind of exciting developments, exciting opportunities to activate our right of way beyond the tradition of transportation. To make them, you know, more of yeah, they can get you from point A to point B, but when you include things like, you know, arts and other things, make it much more attractive and an attraction in and of itself. That's new. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would be really cool if there's an opportunity for us to test different amenities as part of the, you know, as you're thinking about and getting feedback and so forth, to test sort of different ideas for what amenities would draw people. Thank you.
Yeah, that also would be a great opportunity for public involvement. You know, what does the public want to see in a you know, a smaller facility like that we can incorporate? And they don't have to necessarily be expensive options. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a great presentation. I just want to call out that Congressman Adam Smith has been a real advocate for this refinancing of the Tiffia loan. I know that before Joyce left, she spoke with him many times, as did I. So my fingers are crossed that we are successful with that. I also want to thank the community for their advocacy for the sidewalk on Newport Way and also along Lake Sammamish. I mean, the community came out really strongly in favor of those projects, and we as a council voted to advance those because it was such a safety issue. And so it was fun to be responsive to the community, but I really applaud the community for having such a loud voice on that. Also that safe routes to school grants, you know, when we first did the levy, you mentioned that we would be applying for those. And it's great to know that we've received them, because when I speak with the community, those who live around the elementary schools, that's one of their biggest concerns, is having more crosswalks and safer routes for their kids to get to school. I have two questions for you. One, I see needs for, is it scrambles where you cross both directions? So I wonder if we have plans to put in some scrambles, especially now that the Northeast Downtown Park entrance is completed. I just see that intersection seems like it would be really a good one for a scramble. And then my other question is, in Crossroads, we put in a new bike path, ped bike path. You know what I'm talking about. And I'm wondering if we can look at the properties and the right-of-ways that you're talking about and see if we can create some safe routes for bikes that are off the beaten path, that make it easier for people to commute in those areas where the traffic is so heavy on the streets.
Okay, coming back to your first question, yes, there will be some more ped scrambles coming up. I don't know exactly where or whether there will be one at the downtown park. So let me get back to you on that after talking with our operations staff. They have a tremendous advantage for pedestrians and cyclists to get, you know, diagonal across an intersection. If you're not aware of what a scramble phase is, it allows you to move in any direction that, if you're a pedestrian or cyclist, all traffic is stopped in all directions. And really fantastic for pedestrians and cyclists, not so much for vehicular traffic, but in some locations that's okay. Areas like around the transit center, we have scramble phase. And we'll have a scramble phase on the east side of the transit center once we make the intersection improvements there. So let me get back to you on the around the downtown park. And second question, path or safe routes off the beaten path. We will take a look at, you know, where we can gain access to properties and gain access to easements, particularly at low or no cost when they see benefit, you know, to their development or to their properties. You know, it can be certainly be done easier than, you know, locations where we may have to go in and it's a bit of a battle to do so. But yeah. Certainly for, you know, under a Vision Zero aspect, separating pedestrians and cyclists from vehicles in any manner strongly supports the Vision Zero effort.
Thank you. I'll just say, as somebody who rides my bike quite a bit, I will be happy to go a longer distance if it's a safer route. So it'd be fun to see if we can connect all those little pathways that we have and parkways. Okay, well, thank you. That was great. That's the completion of this presentation. We are going to take a break. It's 8:22. We will reconvene at 8:30. we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. So next up is an ordinance. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce this?
Yes, this is ordinance 6584. It's the 100 Bellevue Way Southeast rezone. And so given this is a quasi-judicial rezone, I'm going to just turn it over to Kathy Earl, our city attorney, to introduce the item. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor and council members. The 100 Bellevue rezone application, which is before you tonight, involves a request to rezone an approximately 0.87 acre parcel from downtown mixed use and office designations to just one single designation of downtown mixed use for the entire parcel. This rezone is intended to make this consistent, make the zoning consistent with the comprehensive plan amendment that the council approved at the end of last year. This is a process 3 quasi-judicial proceeding. The hearing examiner held a public hearing and then has made a recommendation to the council. The hearing examiner recommends approval with a condition, and no appeal of the hearing examiner's decision was filed. As you may recall, at your June 21 meeting, Mark Brennan, one of the city's land use planners, gave a brief overview of the project, and you were presented with the hearing examiner's record in this case. Tonight, this matter is before you to make a decision on the rezone application. In the event, for the convenience of the council, that the council votes to approve the application as recommended by the hearing examiner, staff prepared ordinance 6584, which was included in your packets. If the council chooses not to approve and makes a different decision, then staff will prepare an ordinance following council's direction and come back at a following meeting. The other options besides approval as recommended by the hearing examiner are to approve with additional or different conditions, to remand back for a hearing on a specific issue to the hearing examiner, or to deny the application. Before I turn it over, Mayor, to you for council deliberation and vote, because this is a quasi-judicial matter, I would recommend that the council be given an opportunity to disclose any ex parte contacts they may have had with the applicant or anyone else opposing or supporting the project. And as usual, council staff have already searched your email, so there's no need to disclose anything. Nothing was found in your email. So any ex parte communications other than the council's emails, if there are any, I would recommend the council members disclose those now.
Okay, Councilmember Barksdale, have you had any ex parte communications?
I have not.
Councilmember Robertson, have you?
No, I have not.
Councilmember Zahn, have you?
No.
Deputy Mayor Newhouse, have you?
No, I've not. No, I've not.
Councilmember Lee, have you?
None.
And Councilmember Stokes, have you?
No.
And neither have I had any ex parte communications. So is there any, are there any questions, or is there any discussions, or are we ready to vote? Okay, is there a motion, Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 6584, approving with conditions the rezone application permit file number 21-100101-LQ, a rezone of a split zone 0.87 acre parcel located at 100 Bellevue Way Southeast from downtown mixed use and office to downtown mixed use.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Okay. The next item of business is an opportunity for council to take a position on King County Proposition number 1, the regular property tax levy for children, youth, families, and communities. And I'll turn it over to our clerk, who has some procedural information for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this evening the council has an opportunity, as you said, to take a position on this levy. State law prohibits the use of public resources for the promotion of or opposition to a ballot measure. However, there is a safe harbor clause in the statute that allows council to take a position in an open public meeting. There are some requirements that need to be met in order to take that position. And one of the requirements is that the agenda for the meeting must include the title and number of the ballot proposition itself. And the second is that the members of the public and the council are afforded an approximately equal opportunity to express an opposing view. So after this evening's proceedings, both of those requirements will have been satisfied. And this evening, Sheila Capistani from King County Department of Community and Health Services will give a brief factual report on the levy. Following her report, the co-chair of the pro campaign, Dila Pereira, will give the pro statement. And as of today, staff were unable to locate a con campaign, just for the council's awareness. After the campaign presentations, the public will have up to 15 minutes, 3 minutes per person, and that would allow for 5 speakers on either side of the ballot measure. A draft resolution for the council's consideration has been attached in your packet and attached to the agenda memo. After everyone has had the opportunity to speak, the council can choose to take action on the resolution to support the levy, or the council can choose to take no action at all. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. So Ms. Capistani, welcome. You're the Division Director from King County Department of Community and Human Services. If you could give us a factual report, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have a PowerPoint. Is that coming on? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Just to share some facts about what the renewal looks like for Best Starts for Kids that will be going to the ballot on August 3rd. So next slide. This is the vision statement for Best Starts for Kids, and it will remain so should the levy be renewed. Happy, healthy, safe, and thriving. We want to see all of our babies born healthy, all of our kids thriving, and young people growing to be happy, healthy, successful adults. Next slide. The proposal has really 3 parts to it. And the first part is really about maintaining the current levy strategies. There was a lot of work on a community level and doing research into finding out what were the best things for us to be able to invest in order to meet the goals that we had set for Best Starts for Kids. So in the renewal proposal, the first part of it is to maintain our current levy strategies. That includes the investments in investing early, our prenatal to 5, sustain the gain, which is the 5 to 24-year-olds, communities of opportunity, which is really a public-private partnership with Seattle Foundation and King County, and youth and family homelessness prevention initiative. Next slide. The proposed prenatal to 5 investments that we are proposing are maintained include public health services for new parents and babies, also home-based services for new families, developmental health services, including early support for young people who, little ones under 5 who may have been found to have a potential developmental delay, really investing in community-based and peer supports for parents, and looking at childcare health consultation, which is about assuring that our childcare facilities actually have the coaching and the consultation they need to provide healthy and safe spaces for young people. The final investment is around system supports. So looking at workforce development for the folks who work with young people prenatal to 0 to 5, infant mental health, and a national model that we've replicated this first time around and would continue to do should the levy be renewed, called Help Me Grow, which is really about assuring that families are connected with the type of services that they need. Next slide. 5 to 24 investments that are in the proposal includes these large buckets, and I'm just going to read the titles of those. So investments in youth development, investments in our school partnerships, and investments in family and community connections. Our final general category is transitions to adulthood, which is really the 16 to 24-year-olds high school completion and going on to the next stage of adulthood. And then we have a category that we call stopping the school to prison pipeline, which is really an area that's proposed to be focused investments for a particular group of young people who are at particular risk for ending up in that pipeline, in that system. So next slide, please. So the first part is maintain the current levy strategies. We also have the second part is building upon current levy strategies. So we heard from community that they would like us to deepen our investments in school-age children. So in that sustain the gain, the 5 to 24-year-olds, if we have that opportunity with renewal. So the areas that we would like to deepen investments in include out of school time, what is now being in the field called extended learning programs, school-based health centers to be able to get more school-based health centers into more rural areas in our counties and more suburban areas, and then deepening the investment in transitions to adulthood for those 16 to 24-year-olds. Next slide, please. Finally, there are some additional new investments that have been added to this renewal proposal. The first is a major childcare subsidy program, which would serve at least 3,000 families and really focused on the families that may not qualify for state subsidy, but miss it just by enough that childcare becomes prohibitive for them to be able to keep a living wage job. And a part of the childcare investments that are looked at for new investments is really a childcare worker wage enhancement project. So a pilot project to see if we can support childcare workers to have a living wage. Can we create some sustainability within the system of childcare, which actually leads to both economic stability for the workers themselves and for quality improvement for the childcare facilities. The additional investments also include capital projects for children and youth serving organizations. If the levy stays projected at above 822 million and below 872 million, then that up to 50 million would go towards capital projects throughout the county. And that can be for repairs and remodels, as well as helping to fund for new construction. So maintain the levy, deepen the levy, and then additional new investments. Next slide, please. So this is what the money looks like in a snapshot. So childcare over a 6-year period would come in at about 200 million. Capital projects, again, would be up to 50 million. And capacity building to assure that organizations have what they need to be stable and communities have what they need to get organized around applying for things like capital projects is coming in at about 12 million. And the homelessness prevention project is at 30 million investment. After those, the rest of the levy is divided by percentage. So investing early, the prenatal to 5 would be 50% of the remaining levy. Sustaining the gain, the 5 to 24-year-olds would be 37% of the remaining levy. Communities of opportunity, or what we call communities matter, would be 8% of the remaining levy, and data evaluation would remain at 5% of the remaining levy. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, Best Starts for Kids renewal proposal is a 6-year property tax. It is an increase from a 14-cent to 19-cent per thousand assessed value. The average right now in King County for assessed value is $600K, and that it would be about 114 for the average property owner. Obviously, with a home that has a higher value, the tax is going to go up a little bit more, and lesser value a little bit less. A lot of variety throughout the county on this one. And then our last economic forecast in March projected a revenue change from what the executive had proposed at 811 million to 872 million at that 19 cents assessed value. Next slide, please. That's it. So that's the renewal proposal in a nutshell.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Capistani. So now I'll ask Dila Pereira, co-chair of the PRO campaign and executive director of Open Arms Perinatal Services, to please give the PRO statement. Ms. Pereira, you have up to 10 minutes total to give the statement, and the city clerk will track your time and let you know when you have 2 minutes left and when your time is up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and seek your support for the renewal of Best Starts for Kids. I am volunteering as a campaign co-chair for the renewal of Best Starts for Kids. And my day job is as an executive director of an organization that helps promote maternal health, infant health, and early learning throughout King County. I've personally seen how Best Starts for Kids has amplified our impact and our reach. Best Starts for Kids strengthened and the safety net throughout King County at just the right moment, so that every kid and young person in our county could have a strong start in life and the opportunity to reach their potential. And I am certain that the ability of our children and our youth to weather the COVID-19 pandemic is greater because of the services and support that Best Starts for Kids help to implement, strengthen, and provide. That's why it's essential that we renew Best Starts for Kids and Prop 1 on our ballot. Best Starts is an effective, evidence-based levy that maintains and expands community-led programs that are proven to help young people at every stage of life. And Ms. Cabestany laid out how those programs go from pregnancy all the way to age 24. We know that investing in early in kids helps them thrive. And one of the things that Best Starts for Kids has done so well is to support prevention and early intervention strategies that help thousands of kids stay in school, address personal challenges, and work through cost-effective engagement to help facilitate their future success. Best Starts for Kids supports vulnerable families, and it also helps to spark true potential, growth, and well-being. This is about hope, and this is about the future. And this is about helping our kids have the best possible start. So we're talking about healthy outcomes and healthy communities. And your future bike riders and future civil and software engineers. I like the previous presentation, which is why I bring that up. Renewing Best Starts for Kids also helps to expand school-based health programs and mental health supports, helping to address the alarming increase in youth depression and other behavioral health concerns that have arisen during the pandemic. This includes innovative, groundbreaking programs like Youth Eastside Services Be Glad program, which provided essential mental health support for LGBTQ+ youth and children at an incredibly critical time. Renewal continues outreach and partnerships for pregnant and parenting families, so babies and children have the strongest start in life. And the renewal will also provide 3,000 low-income families with access to childcare. That is critical for economic recovery, family stability, and gender equity, especially for moms who left the workforce during the pandemic. In addition, levy dollars have already helped over 10,000 families avoid homelessness. Renewal continues rental assistance and other critical homelessness prevention strategies. And Eastside partners like HopeLink, Youth Eastside Services, Friends of Youth, and others have helped to prevent homelessness on the East Side and throughout the county at one of the most critical times in our history because of Best Starts for Kids support. Best Starts for Kids has helped to fund over 480 organizations so far, and over 190 of those programs serve kids and youth in Bellevue. As a leader of a community organization, I know firsthand that we need strong government partnerships to do our work. And your support is critical to tackle multifaceted challenges like homelessness. It must be a county-wide effort that will include the strong example of Bellevue and other Eastside communities. We would be honored if the Bellevue City Council joined Executive Constantine along with county council members, mayors, and organizations throughout the county that are serving children and families to support the renewal of Proposition 1. As the Seattle Times wrote in their endorsement, Best Starts has made a difference in the lives of hundreds of thousands of children, young adults, and families, and it deserves to be renewed. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Pereira, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate you being here tonight. We have had no official campaign identified, so I'll ask the clerk to see if there's any other speakers signed up to comment this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no pre-registered speakers either in support or in opposition. So at this point, I would ask if there is anyone connected to the meeting who would like to make a comment in favor or in opposition to this ballot measure. Please use the raise hand function or *9 if connected with a phone. And Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, so I'm going to open this up for questions or comments. Just raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. I see Councilmember Barksdale and Stokes and Robertson. And when we're done questioning and commenting, we will take a vote. Go ahead, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Really excited about how holistic this Best Starts for Kids program is. One of my questions just has to do with the childcare. So I think as far as I've noticed, childcare facilities typically are established in sort of core downtown or like very densely populated areas. But I think also having them in the neighborhoods closer to residences is also helpful, especially if parents are, trading out in terms of responsibilities as they, get off to work and so forth. Does funding through Best Starts for Kids also support having childcare facilities in neighborhoods? And I think this also gets closer to our 15-minute city as well. So.
Ms. Capistani, did you want to, or does somebody else want to answer this?
I can sure answer that. I wanted to ask procedurally is that I can answer factual questions. The money in Best Starts for Kids is for a subsidy program. So it just goes to families to help them pay for childcare. The county currently has another investment called the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Account, or PASTA, which has a large investment in childcare facilities. And so that is a part of PASTA. And it is the desire, if we had renewal, that we leverage those two programs and be able to really extend to where our families need to have childcare.
So, thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to, I guess we can make just general comments, right?
Yes.
Okay. So just want to make sure. I wanted to point out, and it's relevant to, why this is something we should be doing and working with the county on this and the cities. And I want to thank Sheila particularly. On the Regional Policy Committee, we had some very robust discussions about this a couple of times and working with staff, and we really appreciate, and I think we've worked out something that's really going to improve the collaboration between the cities on the rest of the county and working on this together. And, also in sharing information and finding out ways, working together so we can get an idea of, how this fits in, because there's so many different organizations working on this, so we can coordinate those things. And again, I think, we got a lot done. It was really a great collaboration. That, and I think it to me typifies the way that this program has been run and functioning all along. So I'm very excited about it. And my other motivation for being supportive of it is my daughter Genevieve, who works with children, families and youth, continuously reminds me why this is really important. That it's really unique the way the county and the cities within the county have put together this Best Starts for Kids. And that's what all comes down to. We've got to give every child the best start possible. And this is a great vehicle for it. And I'm thrilled to support it and vote for it and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. No, I'm also supportive of this levy, but I had a couple of questions that weren't in the packet or the materials. So what was the millage rate that was adopted 6 years ago when this levy was first passed?
I'm not sure how to answer that actually. A millage rate, you mean the rate for the levy?
Yeah, the cents per thousand. It's 19 cents per thousand.
14 cents per thousand.
And what was the millage rate, the actual, because it doesn't stay tracked because of how we levy taxes. What was the millage rate in 2021 for this levy?
Yes, so there's a 3% growth cap on the levy every year. So this year it's about 11.5 cents.
Okay, yeah, because it goes down because value of property goes up faster. Inflation. Okay, I was just curious to compare apples to apples because this is 19 cents. I think it's always good to keep in mind, and I'm happy to support it. It can do even more. Is there going to be any money earmarked for helping kids who have had either learning loss or mental health challenges as a result of all the school shutdowns? We've got a significant number of children who are very, very behind, who either didn't show up, failed, etc., as well as mental health challenges. Are we looking at that issue? Because I think that would be a really good use for this money.
We're definitely looking at that issue. There are some programs that are already embedded in the current levy that support mental health and mental wellness for young people. That is is slated to continue should the levy be renewed. And under COVID, there was a youth-focused initiative called Community Wellbeing. And it really focused on mental health issues. It focused on working with peers to provide support to one another. Because it was a pandemic response, as we saw how successful it was, we've incorporated it into Best Starts right now, about mid-year last year, and we're doing it now. It is slated to continue under the new levy if it is renewed. Again, working with peers and getting into schools and communities to talk about mental health, some of the mental health challenges, and substance use prevention.
I am sure glad I asked that question. That is excellent. Very happy to hear that. And also just wanted to give a shout out for the visiting nurses for the new babies, the programs that help launch new families. I think that is so important to the public health and well-being of young families, especially people who may not have the resources. So I'm all for it. And thank you for answering my questions.
I may add, I will pass. Oh, go ahead, Sheila.
I just wanted to add one other thing, because I didn't make it clear in the presentation, is there's still a 3% cap on the levy. And so that 19 cents will go down over the life of the levy as well.
That always happens, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Dila.
I was just going to add to your point that Nurse Family Partnership are among our colleagues. We work together, so I will pass on your regards. And one of the things that I think is really beautiful about what happened with Best Starts for Kids funded organizations and programs is we were able to pivot during the pandemic and adjust what we were doing. So for example, we work with pregnant and parenting families, as does Nurse Family Partnership. And when some of the mental health concerns were coming up during COVID for pregnant people, birthing people, young parents, we were able to adjust to do things to check on their mental health and well-being, provide other resources, even provide tablets for people who were homebound and maybe didn't have a way of contacting or interacting with people because they didn't have internet or a smartphone. And so I think one of the things that it allowed the county to do and for organizations to do was to pivot and adjust so that we can continue to do what we needed to do to support families during the pandemic.
Terrific. Any other comments or questions? Council members on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think this is such an important piece to help with prevention, making sure that as we move forward, that all of the kids have what they need to, and really it's about thriving. So I like the fact that it isn't just about happy, healthy, safe, but it's about thriving, which is a forward-leaning view. I had a question on the mental health piece. So I agree that our kids coming out of COVID have experienced a lot of stress and mental health. I'm also concerned about the parents. So when I think about parents of middle school and high schoolers and what they're going through, how they support their kids as they go through those potential mental health type of challenges. So does this funding support the whole family? So it would be for both the students and the parents. Is that right? Just want to confirm.
Most of the funding around that is supporting the students, but we do have a strategy that's parent engagement and family connections. And that, if we have a renewal, will probably pivot from what it has been to address exactly what you're talking about, is sort of where is that stress level and how will parents be able to continue to support their young people as they enter into this next phase. And then beyond, we have no idea what those continuing impacts will be. But built into this renewal is an ability to be nimble and respond to community as it was built into the first levy as well.
That would be great, because I've heard that there's been a higher level of domestic violence and in the homes. And so the ability to support the parents will be really important. And then the comments earlier about childcare, and to the degree that we can make sure that the pipeline for childcare, that those programs, and also ones that have the community-based, culturally appropriate, so that we have children and families that feel like they're as supported as possible, centered for what they need, to to be able to thrive. So does it include that aspect as well?
Yes, the proposal covers being able to work with all kinds of childcare, so from centers to home, and across the cultural and language needs for people within the county.
Okay, and then my last question is, I think when you talked about the capital cost, you made a comment that only if we reached a certain dollar amount of collection would we have funding for capital projects. So hopefully we are able to hit those thresholds. Certainly as a member of the King County Board of Health, what we heard is that one of the best preventions for youth violence was more community centers and community programs, and actually having facilities and spaces for youth to go after school. And so my sense is that if we look at all of King County, there may be some gaps in those types of facilities that may be needed.
Mm-hmm. That restriction, thank you for that. Clarifying that is was a council ad, and the baseline that they said, as long as it doesn't fall under 822 million, we're already projected to be 50 million over that. So they were trying to protect the current investments and not have a new addition impact those investments that was already in the plan, but to say, if those levy projections continue to go up, this is how we will use those new dollars. And then they capped it at 872. So if it's possible, who knows how the economic forecast will continue to go up, but then that, whatever's on top of that, gets reinvested in the strategies that are already being invested in. So it gets a little complicated, but it's a 50 million there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think any investment in a child is going to impact positively your entire city, and it's the best investment we can make in our community. So I think we see broad support here. If there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to ask our Deputy Mayor for a motion.
Certainly. I move to adopt Resolution 9966, supporting the King County Proposition Number 1, regular property tax levy for children, youth, families, and communities.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you so much. All right. We have two more ordinances here. And sometimes, despite what a city has decided for itself, the state creates rules and regulations that supersede ours. And that is the case with these next two ordinances tonight.
Really good job. Explosive.
Excuse me, I hear somebody talking in here.
Behind him, a linebacker, one of the best linebackers.
Okay. Anyway, so Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first ordinance?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. Ordinance 6585 will allow permanent supportive housing and transitional housing in all land use districts where residences and or hotels and motels are permitted, and to allow homeless service uses in all land use districts where hotels and motels are allowed. Just by way of background, she mentioned House Bill 1220 was signed into law in May as part of the 2021 state legislative session and goes into effect on July 25th. Council was given a preview of the interim official control that we're asking for tonight during the legislative update on June 28th. Tonight, we are looking for direction from the council to adopt this ordinance. We have joining us Mike Brennan, the director, as well as Trisna Tanis, consulting attorney, Caleb Miller, senior planner, all from the development services, as well as Matt McFarland, assistant city attorney of the city attorney's office. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and council members. Caleb or Trisna put the presentation up, and we'll kind of track through this. We have a short presentation this evening to introduce this ordinance 6585 that, as Mr. Miyake mentioned, puts in place an interim official control that amends the land use code to align the code with recently passed legislation. If the council, next slide, please. If the council acts tonight, which is we are asking council for action on ordinance number 6585. If the council does act tonight, It would require a public hearing within 60 days of your action for interim official controls. We have tentatively scheduled that public hearing for this ordinance on August 2nd. Following the public hearing, we would then ask the council to direct the Planning Commission to develop the permanent regulations that would come back to council for final adoption. So again, this evening, we are just seeking council's action on 6585. So for additional information on the materials we'll be covering in this presentation and a bit of background on the legislation, I'll hand it to Matt McFarland. Matt?
Thanks, Mike. Next slide, please. So Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. So as Mike and City Manager Miyake both mentioned, the purpose of this interim official control, which is one of two that you'll be considering tonight, is to bring the city into timely compliance with Washington House Bill 1220. And we will provide an overview of what the interim official control would do to bring the city into compliance, the different components of this particular interim official control, and the process for council to consider going forward with respect to interim official controls under the Growth Management Act. Next slide, please. So House Bill 1220, it amends several sections in the Growth Management Act, and it also amends the state law code city provisions that apply to Bellevue as well. And it really addresses 4 different types of housing types is the way to look at it. Permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, emergency housing, and indoor emergency shelters. And so with respect to the first 2 housing types, permanent supportive housing and transitional housing, House Bill 1220 requires that all cities allow permanent supportive housing and transitional housing in all land use districts where residential dwellings and/or hotels are allowed. And with respect to the other 2 housing types, emergency housing and indoor emergency shelters, the requirement is to allow these housing types in all land use districts where hotels are permitted. And this this changes to the Growth Management Act and also the changes to the Code City provisions becomes effective on July 25th, which is why we're bringing this package to council as an interim official control. And again, it's designed to bring the city into immediate compliance with the state law. And as I mentioned when we introduced this during the legislative overview, we anticipate that the interim official control process will provide the public hearing and the ability for council to discuss the permanent regulations that would be developed while the interim official control is in place. So I will pass it on to Caleb to talk a little bit more about the specifics of this particular interim official control.
Great. Thank you, Matt, and good evening, Mayor and council members. First, I'll just discuss these specific housing types that are addressed in HB 1220. On the left, you'll see permanent supportive housing and transitional housing. These are supposed to be long-term interventions to persons experiencing homelessness. They're really meant to either keep residents in their homes either permanently with supportive services or to transition them over, say, a 2-year period into independent living arrangements. And then on the right, we have emergency housing and emergency shelter. These are going to be your shorter term interventions. Emergency housing is really intended to sort of be a transition in itself from basically meeting their basic daily needs to maybe transitional or permanent supportive housing as a more permanent arrangement. And then emergency shelter, that's really intended to be maybe overnight facilities or cooling centers for hot days like we just experienced recently. Next, I'll go through the components of the IOC. First, we will include, or we're proposing to include a new note in the land use tables to indicate permanent supportive housing and transitional housing are allowed in all zones where residences and hotels and motels are allowed. And then with that, homeless services uses are currently permitted in most zones where hotels are allowed currently. except for the neighborhood mixed use and office and limited business and open space districts. So we will be updating the land use tables to reflect the requirements in HB 1220. With that in mind, these will homeless services uses will still be subject to conditional use permit approval, as well as their supplemental approval criteria under the code. And then finally, the amendments will include just a couple changes to the homeless services uses definitions to reflect the emergency housing and emergency shelter provisions that were adopted in HB 1220, just for consistency with state law. And then finally, the process for the IOC, no public hearing is required prior to adoption, but it is required within 60 days after adoption. The IOC can be effective for 6 months, and it can be renewed with another public hearing for an additional 6 months as well. And then finally, staff does intend to develop permanent regulations for in response to both of these bills through the LUCA process. And with that, there will be plenty of public outreach, particularly with the Planning Commission, as they hold their study sessions and eventually a public hearing prior to their recommendation to the City Council. So with that in mind, staff does recommend adoption of ordinance number 6585. I'll pass it back to you.
You as in me?
Yes, Mayor. Okay. So we'll take each ordinance independently here. So back to the council for any questions.
Okay, great. So we're talking about ordinance 6585 right now. I will entertain questions and comments. If you raise your hand, I can see you. I'll start with Councilmember Lee and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have a question. When you say compliance with the HB 1220, what does that mean? Could you describe for everybody, including the public? I read, through our own, regulation, we are allowed, a certain number of people unrelated, in a home. So the city has.
Councilmember Lee.
No.
That's the next ordinance. The one that
sorry.
That's okay. The one we're talking about right now is
okay. So maybe you could explain to me also what do you mean by in compliance?
Okay,
what do we have?
Compliance for 6585.
Right. So what's the city's regulation now? And the state has changed it, right? And then we have to comply with the state's law. I want to know what that is. So that's the first question. Second question, do we have to comply? What's the local jurisdiction's authority in this requirement to comply? Thank you. 2 questions.
So Matt, you mind maybe answering the second question first about our obligation, and then either Matt or Trisna on what the changes are that are being proposed here.
So the requirement in its most basic form is that all cities are required to allow supportive housing and transitional housing in land use districts where residential dwellings and hotels are allowed. And in the requirement with respect to the emergency housing and the indoor emergency shelter is that those uses have to be allowed in land use districts where hotels are allowed. And so the mandate from the state is to the extent that the city's land use code does not allow those 4 uses in the land use districts that the state is saying they must be allowed, the city has to amend its land in order to conform with that state mandate. And what we've tried to do with this interim official control is to bring the city into immediate compliance with an interim ordinance, an emergency ordinance, before the July 25th effective date. And some of these changes to the land use code are consistent with the way that we've regulated comparable uses in the past. some of the changes are different than the way that we've regulated in the past. But the fundamental mandate from the state is to allow these 4 uses in the land use districts that they've identified.
Can I continue, please, Mayor? What I want to know is, what are we consistent with the state? What are we not consistent with the state? And are we forced to comply, or do we have the latitude to disagree and have our own rules? And what happens if we do not comply with everything that the state requires to?
Well, the requirement is coming from the state. To a certain extent, the state has preempted local regulation of these uses. And so the city would be required to comply with this state mandate.
Absolutely.
He's wondering what would happen if we didn't comply. Could somebody sue us? Could we be reprimanded?
Well, we could certainly be challenged if we were inconsistent with the state. There's no doubt about that. Our code could be subject to a legal challenge.
Okay.
Councilmember Lee, I'll let you think on that, and I'll come back to you if you have more questions. But let me give somebody else a chance to talk. Deputy Mayor, you are next.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. But actually, Councilmember Robertson had her hand up before me, so I'll defer to her right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Doesn't matter. I apologize for interjecting, by the way. I could hear someone talking before when I thought someone was unmuted. Anyway, thanks. So on this, Matt, and I'm personally in favor of complying with state law and not having our land use code challenged by applicants or being ineligible for grants for failure to comply with GMA, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we need to do it, whether we like it or not. So I'm in favor of this IOC. I had a couple of questions. One is more of a comment. The legal red line doesn't show up. There's 2 on both these ordinances. It says there's a legal red line where you would normally have the strikeout text and then for something that's taken out and the underline for the new text. I don't know about anybody else, but that does not show up. And it doesn't show up on iLegislate, and it doesn't show up when I've pulled stuff down online. So before we, can we at some point get a legal red line of that? Because I would like to actually see it. Number 2, is there anything in this ordinance that goes beyond the bare minimum to comply with state law?
For this interim official control, no, there is not. We are trying to bring the city into immediate compliance with state law. One thing that we did point out in the agenda memo is that we did think that as council, or we anticipated perhaps, that as council adopted and processed the permanent regulations, that with respect to the supportive housing and the transitional housing, that the land use process may generate a distinct regulatory scheme for those specific uses. So to your question, Councilmember Robertson, we really are trying to meet the July 25th date with a fairly straightforward interim official control. I think council would see with the emergency housing and the emergency shelter, we're subjecting those uses to our homeless services uses regulations that are already in place. But we did anticipate, without wanting to anticipate the actual policy direction, that perhaps for the transitional housing and the permanent supportive housing, the council may provide us direction to actually create a different regulatory scheme for those uses as we move forward too.
Great, and I would be in support of that. I think that we need to have a Bellevue specific policy where we can legally do so. So the other thing I'm wondering if we're going to look at after we adopt this and we start studying is if there's any areas of the city where hotels are allowed but are not developed, and maybe we don't really want them to be hotels, because that might be if it's allowed for hotels, then it's allowed for homeless shelters. And it may be that every place where we currently have zone for hotels, we think is a great fit for hotels, and therefore it's a great fit for potential homeless shelters. But I would like to look at that issue when we're studying this and making the permanent regulations. So, but if this just does exactly what we need to do with a scalpel to make our code compliant, then I am in favor of passing it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would agree with Councilmember Robertson. Given where we are right now, I would be in favor of just moving this forward, just stay within requirements here. And it is a very straightforward IOC, and then certainly we can have the public hearing. I feel like you're going to hear from some disgruntled residents on this, or some folks don't like to see the city council's ability for zoning and land use to be usurped by the state. So, but my only thing would be, as Councilmember Robertson I think alluded to, is, what can we do to keep this Bellevue specific? What can we do to have some measure of control? Anything that we can, get back a little bit of management, if you will, of this type of process here in terms of Luca. So, I don't expect you to be able to answer that, and it's probably very limited. But I think that would be something that I'd be looking for as you go through the public hearing process, and this comes back before us. Those are some of the things that I'd be interested in. Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I would, appreciate looking at it that way. I do think that one, and I mean, the legal authority comes from the state. We're not a duchy by ourselves. I think hopefully we have a little bit open mind that maybe this has some purpose behind it, and this was enacted for some purpose. And we've been talking about wanting to really advance our emergency housing, our supporting our transitional housing, emergency shelters. And this city is changing. And I hope we look at it as, is this something that, one, we have to do? And secondly, instead of spending a lot of time trying to wiggle around it somehow, really take a hard look at how would this help us move forward on all our adopted policies, our actions we are taking already, the investments we've made. So if we can look at this in a very eyes open, but also positive, as opposed to, kind of a, yeah, they can't tell us what to do attitude, I think we'll come out of this a lot better. And I think part of it is we do this, we explain to our constituents that, why we're doing this and why this is the way the governmental system is set up, and we're doing that. And I think it gives us an opportunity to maybe do some things that we hadn't done before. And if we want to have some limitations that we legally can put in there, I do not also want us to have to spend a whole lot of money fighting the state if we go off in some errant way. And I think everybody appreciates that too. So, let's get this done, and then we work on the permanent part.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to weigh in here. I see the value of having the opportunity to create these resources. We definitely have populations right now who are not being served. We don't serve the women. They all have to go to Kirkland. We don't serve the young adults. They all have to go to Redmond. Hardly anybody serves families. And so, and then, if you have a pet, it's really hard to find a place to go. We definitely need more opportunities for people to find shelter. But I would like to, when this goes by the Planning Commission, I want to look at, shelter is just not enough. You need to have the services along with that. And so I will be very interested to see if we can mandate that the services coincide with these facilities, because it really doesn't help you to just get emergency housing when you've been traumatized and you're recovering. You need support, and you need that through services. So I'd really like to look at what we can do there to guarantee that these facilities, if indeed they are permitted, actually provide the support services necessary to help these people. So any more questions or comments? Are we ready to vote? Councilmember Lee, I promised you I'd come back to you, so here I am.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sumi. Well, I welcome the opportunity to have new information, including that come from the state and other folks. And we are addressing these issues right in front of us. Just this evening, we're so thankful and so pleased what we've done. And this is all part of that. And so in order to do that, we have to have a understanding discussion. One of which is what the mayor mentioned. What can we do better? But instead, we are responding to a mandate from the state. Well, that's what you have to do. We're responding to it. That doesn't give us the opportunity to discuss and talk, especially let our public to hear what they have to say. So my interest is not to say no. We don't want to do it. The interest is we're responding to what they're making us. Some council members know a lot more than others. I believe that Councilmember Robinson said she already understands what that is, what it is about, and she agrees to support it. But for me, I speak for myself and for a lot of people, I believe, in the community. I don't know. I'm looking into that closely on this particular issue, and we just started. So I would love to, I would like to be in a position where I can discuss it, understand it better. We can't just say the state wants it, so I got to do it. So in that case, why are we even here? Because they may or may not listen to us. So I think we have the ability to do that. And if we know something we definitely want, we support it, I have no problem with it. And as long as I understand it, give me the opportunity to do so, and the rest of the community, and plus maybe more than just Conrad Lee who wants that information. And the things I don't understand, I like to have the opportunity to do it before I say, yeah, go ahead and do it.
Let me just interject here for a minute.
Yes,
Mike, is there going to be much of a community process here in going through this?
Yeah, so the way we move forward from here, if council acts this evening, the next step would be a public hearing to solicit public input on the interim official control. So that'd be the first point. Council can take that input in addition to what we've already heard tonight to form the direction to the Planning Commission. Then it would go to the Planning Commission, where we would work the Planning Commission through study sessions. There would be public comment opportunities, obviously, at Planning Commission. There would be a public hearing with the Planning Commission on the permanent regulations before it comes back to the council with their recommendation. So there's quite a few steps that we have to move forward here, and a significant opportunity for public participation.
And so if council wants to get more information on their own, what would be the best way for them to do that? Could they have a staff meeting or?
Yes, absolutely. If council members have questions or are looking for additional information on this subject, certainly reach out to me, anybody else with Trisna, Matt. I'm happy to follow up with you with any additional information that will help you understand this and then move it forward.
So I'm gonna see if we're ready for a vote here, and then we have another ordinance to discuss. Deputy Mayor, would you mind making a motion?
Certainly, I move to adopt ordinance 6585, imposing an interim official control to amend sections of the land use code to allow permanent supportive housing and transitional housing in all land use districts where residential dwellings and/or hotels and motels are allowed, and to allow homeless services uses in all land use districts where hotels and motels are allowed, and amend the definition of homeless services uses for conformance and consistency with state law.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I oppose.
Okay. So next we
Can I?
no.
Okay.
No. Next, we go on to ordinance 6586. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce that one, please?
Yes, Mayor Robinson and council members. Ordinance 6586 removes the residential occupancy limits from the land use code. And just by way of background, Senate Bill 5235 was signed into law in May as part of the 2021 legislative session. It goes into effect on July 25th, just like the prior ordinance. The bill prohibits cities from imposing occupancy limitations for residential dwellings except for health and safety limits. The city's land use code currently limits occupancy of dwellings to no more than 4 unrelated people. Therefore, then interim official control is needed prior to the effective date of Senate Bill 5235 to bring the land use code into conformance with the state law. Council was given a preview of this interim official control during the legislative update on June 28th. Again, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike Brennan and his team for the presentation and to answer any questions the council may have before you take a vote on this. Mike?
Great, thank you, Mr. Miyake. Again, the process is very similar here, or identical to the previous discussion. If council acts this evening on this ordinance 6586, we would prepare for the public hearing within that 60-day time limit. Again, this would also be tentatively scheduled for August 2nd, so we'd hold both of these public hearings on the same evening. That would be our recommendation. And again, following the public hearing, we'll ask the council to direct the Planning Commission to develop the permanent regulations for final adoption by council at a future date. So again, significant amount of process to move forward and engage the public with both the IOC and the future permanent regulations. So for additional information, again, the action this evening, next slide, please. The action this evening is a recommendation from staff to adopt ordinance 6586. And I'll hand it to Trisna Tanis, who will speak a bit more about the content of this particular IOC. Trisna.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Noonhouse, and council members. So we have a short presentation for you tonight. Next slide, please. So we'll begin by providing a quick summary of the state legislation, Senate Bill 5235, which is the reason for this particular IOC ordinance. We will explain the existing occupancy limits in the land use code, including where they differ from the Senate bill provisions, and then we'll go through the components of the IOC that's necessary to timely conform the land use code to the Senate bill, and close with the description of the process for the IOC, similar to what you just went through with the previous House bill. Next slide, please. So in this past legislative session, in addition to the House Bill 1220 that you just heard about in the previous item, the state legislature also passed and the governor signed into law Senate Bill 5235. The bill will become effective on July 25th, as you heard earlier, at which point the provisions of this bill will be codified in a new section within the RCW. And the new section will contain provisions that will restrict cities from limiting the number of unrelated persons that may occupy a dwelling unit. Currently, the land use code defines family as a maximum of 4 unrelated adults, and this is the governor of how many unrelated adults can live in a single family dwelling. And this is what is in conflict with the new state regulation. We are proposing this IOC to quickly and timely conform the land use code to this new state law. Pending council direction, we are planning on developing permanent regulations to be processed by the Planning Commission. So next slide, please. And I'm going to turn over the rest to Caleb for the rest of staff's presentation on this. Caleb?
Great, thank you, Trisna. So first I'll go through the existing occupancy limits found in the land use code. The main driver, as Trisna noted, is our family definition. Currently allows for an unlimited number of related people, and that's by blood, marriage, or legal adoption. And then there is a maximum of 4 unrelated adults in the definition of family. There are a couple other specific housing types that have their own occupancy limits. The first is accessory dwelling units. And those, in the section for those currently just refers to the family definition of 4 unrelated adults. And then rooming houses have a limit of no more than 4 rooms being rented to no more than 5 tenants at any one time. So all of these are in conflict with the state law as amended under SB 5235. So the components of this interim official control, first and foremost, we are proposing to amend the family definition, and the language pretty much as proposed is here, 1 or more persons residing in a dwelling, operating as a single housekeeping unit. And then with that, we're also proposing to amend the definition for single housekeeping units to remove the requirement for all residents to be on a single lease, and then clarify that it does not apply to occupants in a transient lodging situation. And then finally, as I noted, ADUs and rooming houses have their own occupancy limits, and this IOC is proposing to remove those. And then finally, again, as we've discussed, the process for the IOC, a public hearing is required within 60 days after adoption, tentatively scheduled for August 2nd. The IOC is effective for 6 months and can be renewed with another public hearing. And then as we've discussed, the Planning Commission will hold study sessions and public hearings in order to solicit public input during the LUCA process for the permanent regulations. And then with that in mind, staff does recommend adoption of ordinance number 6586.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is very similar to the other ordinance in that it's a state mandate. There will be a large public process and council education will be available as needed. So there's not a whole lot we can do about that tonight. But if you have any questions or comments, we can ask that now, but there will be an opportunity for the public to weigh in quite a bit on this and for us to learn more about what we can do to modify or to support this ordinance. So any questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion?
I have a question.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I appreciate the mayor and the staff's comment that there will be plenty of public process. The one thing that I'm not comfortable with and object to is we take the wrong direction. We agree to this and put in a public hearing and let people know we already agreed to this, and then let people to come to speak against it. As we know, this is how the political process works. And I think we need to take our position the right way, is that they are changing our regulations and code without us making the effort to talk to our folks first. And so I really object to that. We have spent a lot of time to look at each code, each regulation. On this one, also particularly, I remember clearly, it's not just something that happened overnight. So I feel that, we're going to accomplish the same purpose. Yes, public hearing, we're going to make the decision. That's fine. But we just went the wrong way. We gave the wrong message, wrong direction, and gave unfair advantage to something that we have to prove ourselves instead of the other people have to prove themselves. It's called unfunded mandate. We all object to it. But this case, we're not. So I disagree with this. I have not made my mind on this substance. I may support it. I could, but I'm just objecting. Actually, I supported the previous one in a way, but I voted against it because I believe we went the wrong approach.
So Councilmember Lee, I think, what you're saying is that there was a reason that we put in the ordinance that we did with the limitations that we did. And that freedom to do that is being removed by the state mandate here. But that doesn't mean that there might be a way to protect the neighborhoods in the way that the residents that asked for those protections before might still have some confidence in these ordinances. So that's yet to be explored. But we have to go with what the state recommends, but there may be caveats that we can include in this, and that's what the Planning Commission can look at, and that's what the residents can weigh in on. I have no idea where we'll end up with that, but I think that's what you're saying, and that's a process that we have yet to go through. And so voting in this interim ordinance gives us the opportunity to move to the next step of having the public hearing, sending it to the Planning Commission, getting public feedback, and having a recommendation brought back to us that may or may not look exactly like what we're seeing tonight. So
I thank you. I think your intention, I perfectly do. I'm just concerned about how we approach this and put real disadvantage on the position that the public might hold. So
okay, well, I hear you.
That's the point. And we can accomplish the same thing either way. So why are we putting our hands behind our back?
We're not. We're moving on to the next step here. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, because I don't think it came up, the Matt or Mike, even with this change, there's still our maximum, it's getting late, occupancy limits on residential, well, on all buildings, isn't there?
So for a typical commercial building, like an assembly use where you see maximum occupant load signs, etc., there is actually a formula that's in the building and fire code that determines that. That level of specificity does not exist in single family residential or in a dwelling unit. So what regulates the level of occupancy really is if it gets to a place of overcrowding as determined by the building official or fire marshal, they can intervene at that point to ensure that whatever the overcrowding, the unsafe condition the overcrowding is causing is remedied. So that we don't have that level of specificity like an occupant load factor as we do in other uses.
Could we amend the fire code to put in an occupancy limitation factor for residential buildings? So many square feet per person?
So that would be amending the state building code. And to do that, we'd have to go through a state process to do that through the State Building Code Council anytime we amend less than 4 units. But there's a process that we could go through to explore that. We'd have to look at that.
Because I know you can generally make it more protective.
More restrictive, yeah.
Yeah, more restrictive. We should look at that after we pass this, but I just was curious about that. I thought that might answer some of Councilmember concerns. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? All right, Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion here?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance 6586, imposing an interim official control to amend sections of the land use code to remove limitations on the number of unrelated persons that may occupy a dwelling unit and amend other sections of the land use code for clarification and consistency.
I think you said 6586 and it's Senate Bill 5235. Ordinance.
Yeah, it's our ordinance. Though,
yeah, right? Sorry, I've got my.
Okay.
I'll second.
You're exactly right, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I respectfully vote no.
All right. We got it. And then we
want to say we really love it when the state gives us things that we like. So we'll look at this whole thing.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Good meeting tonight. Meeting is adjourned.